The forest never forgets what it's seen. That's something I learned too late, after years of thinking I was its keeper, its watchful guardian. I thought the woods needed me to protect them from people. What I didn't understand was that it was the other way around. I was protecting people from what the forest still remembered. My name's Jack. I've been a forest ranger for nearly 20 years. I started young, full of that same arrogance you hear in the voices of men who think nature bends for them. Back then, I worked out of the Bitterroot Mountains in Montana, vast ranges of dark pine and silver creeks that seemed to hum even when the wind was still. The kind of silence that gets inside you changes the rhythm of your heartbeat. The first time I stepped out of my truck and saw the valley spread below me, I thought, this is what peace feels like. I didn't know that peace in the wilderness often hides something older, something waiting. The watchtower they assigned me to was old, built in the 1930s, perched on a crumbling granite spine above a lake that caught the light like a blade. It hadn't been manned in nearly a decade. The logs were weathered gray, the steps missing in places, and when I first climbed it, my boots left prints in dust thick as ash. Inside, there was a steel desk, a rotted chair, and a cracked radio set that hadn't buzzed in years. The sign nailed outside still read Lookout 9, but most of the maps called it abandoned. They told me not to use it. That didn't make sense to me. From that height, you could see everything, the long snake of the highway, the endless sprawl of green, the smoke lines when a storm rolled through. So I started using it again, cleaned it up, made it mine. The first few nights were uneventful. I'd climb up at dusk, log my reports, watch lightning storms bloom over the mountains, and drive back to my cabin before midnight. There was a calm to it, just me, the static hum of the forest, and the slow crawl of the Milky Way over the tree line. But one night, the calm broke. It was close to 1 a.m. I'd lingered later than usual, just sitting there, listening to the woods breathe. Then, click. The radio came alive. Just one sound, a short mechanical click. Like someone had tapped the microphone once and let go. I froze. Every ranger knows that sound. It's the way we signal when we can't speak, when we're in trouble. 1 click for help, 2 for I'm okay. But I was alone. Nobody else was supposed to be on frequency 9. I pressed the mic. Dispatch, this is Tower 9. Copy? Nothing. Then again, click. 1 single deliberate tap. I stared at the radio, the hairs on my arms standing up. My first thought was that it was a prank, some hunter messing around with a scanner. But the click came again, softer this time, almost tentative, and then a voice followed. A whisper that barely reached the edge of hearing. 9. Static swallowed the rest. I turned every dial, scanned every channel. Nothing. Just that faint hiss of snow in the speaker. I climbed down not long after, trying to laugh it off. Probably feedback, probably old wiring. That's what I told myself. But when I looked back, I saw something that made me stop halfway down the trail. The light at the top of the tower was on. It shouldn't have been. I'd turned it off when I left. I remember flipping the switch, feeling the darkness press in. But now it glowed, soft, amber, steady, like someone was still up there. I didn't go back that night. I told myself I'd check it in the morning, but in the morning, it was dark again. I drove back, climbed up, checked the bulb. It was cold. No sign of anyone. I logged the incident as equipment malfunction and tried to forget about it. But forgetting isn't something the woods let you do. Weeks passed. The fall storms rolled in, filling the forest with that smell of wet pine and ozone. It was the kind of scent that clung to your clothes, followed you indoors. But the radio kept clicking. Always between midnight and 1, always one single tap, always followed by that faint whisper that seemed to know my name better than I did. Sometimes it wasn't the radio that woke me. It was the light. My cabin was 5 miles from the tower, but on clear nights I could see that orange glint pulsing through the trees. It felt like it was calling me. Once I even followed it. I drove out there after midnight, headlights slicing through fog so thick it looked alive. When I reached the tower, I saw something that made me hesitate to breathe. There were footprints, bare ones, leading up the steps, and they weren't mine. I shone my flashlight up and saw movement inside. A shape. Someone or something leaning over the radio desk. The figure didn't turn, just stood there, head tilted toward the window, like listening for something deep in the forest. I called out, no answer. I climbed one step, then two. The figure vanished. When I reached the top, there was no one. Only the wind howling through the gaps in the wood. I checked the floor, no footprints but mine. I don't remember leaving. I remember running, my breath clouding the night air, my pulse sinking with every echoing crack in the trees. By morning, I told myself it had to be exhaustion, long shifts, cabin fever. Solitude does strange things to the mind. But I wasn't the only one who'd seen something out there. Old rangers talk. Around coffee or whiskey, depending on the night. One evening, after a supply run, I asked the older ranger, Marty, if he ever heard anything from Tower 9. He didn't even look up from his cup. Tower 9's been dead since '89, he said. Lightning strike took it out. Nobody's supposed to be up there. I know, I said. But what if it wasn't? Marty finally met my eyes. His expression was the kind that says, don't push this. But he did tell me one thing. They used to say a man went missing up there. During the fires, he was signaling for help, but nobody could find him. When the storm cleared, the tower was empty. Only the light kept turning on. He looked down, voice dropping low. They buried the replacement parts, said the forest wanted it that way. I didn't sleep that night, not because of the story, but because the forest was whispering again. I could hear it through the thin cabin walls, the trees creaking like old bones, the wind threading voices through the branches, and beneath it, faint and rhythmic, the static pop of a radio signal. The next day, I hiked back up to Tower 9. This time, I brought a new battery, my field recorder, and a stubbornness I mistook for bravery. If something was happening, I needed to document it. I told myself it was duty. But deep down, I think I wanted proof. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The air changed halfway up. It always does, near places that remember too much. The scent of burnt wood lingered, though no fires had touched the mountain in decades. The ground was soft, the moss thick, and every step felt muffled, like walking through a dream that didn't belong to me. When I reached the tower, the light was already on. It shouldn't have been. I climbed the stairs slowly, my recorder running. The wind was dead silent, but I could feel something moving through it. A low vibration, like breath beneath the floorboards. I reached the door. It was open. Inside, the radio was glowing faintly green. The mic was off the hook, and from the speaker came a sound that wasn't static this time. It was the creak of wood, the scrape of boots, and then a voice. Help me find the fire line. A man's voice, faint, cracked with smoke. I can't see the ridge. I froze. Who is this? I said. The response came in a whisper, nearly drowned by static. I'm still here. I stood there in that tower, the radio humming like it was alive, every hair on my neck lifting in sync with the voice. I'm still here, it said again, but quieter now, like the man was stepping away from the mic, walking deeper into the woods even as he spoke. The voice cracked at the edges, rough with static and smoke, as if he hadn't taken a clean breath in years. I pressed the transmit button, forcing my voice to stay calm. This is Ranger Jack. Can you give me your coordinates? Nothing but a hiss, then a soft, wet sound, like a match being struck underwater. Fire. Line. Where are you? I asked again, louder this time, but the radio cut out. The forest outside went silent. No wind, no insects, no night sounds at all. Only my breath echoing too loud in that wooden cabin on stilts. I stepped out onto the catwalk and looked down. The trees spread in every direction, endless, their tops moving in slow waves beneath the moonlight. Then something caught my eye, a flicker of light far below, deep between the pines. A small orange glow, like fire. I snapped my flashlight on and started down the tower steps, 2 at a time. I don't know why I didn't call it in. Maybe I already knew what I'd find, or that I wouldn't find anything at all. Halfway down the trail, the smell hit me first. Smoke and wet earth. The kind of smell that triggers old instincts, the urge to run toward it or away from it, and you never know which until it's too late. I walked fast, scanning the woods, my radio slung at my hip, every crack of a branch making my pulse thump harder. The light grew brighter as I moved. Then, gone. Vanished like someone had blown out a candle. When I reached the clearing, there was no fire, no smoke, only a ring of ash burned into the moss and the faint outline of boot prints, old ones. And in the center, half buried under a layer of soot, was a metal badge. I knelt, brushing the dirt away. U.S. Forest Service, Tower 9, Ranger Cole D. The badge was blackened, melted slightly around the edges, but still legible. I didn't know the name, but the weight of it in my hand felt wrong, like I was holding something I wasn't supposed to. When I turned it over, I saw something scratched into the back. Crude, shaky letters. Still watching. I left the clearing before dawn, not caring if I left a trail behind me. The woods felt closer than before, the trunks leaning inward like listening. I told myself I'd log the badge, hand it over to dispatch, but when I reached the cabin, I locked it in a drawer instead. I didn't want it in the system. Not yet. The radio crackled once that morning, just once, and I turned it off. But that didn't stop the voice. It started showing up in my dreams. Always the same rhythm. The creak of wood, the whisper through static, the smell of smoke. Sometimes I'd wake up to find the radio already on, even though I'd unplugged it. The first time, I threw a towel over it. The second, I left the cabin entirely and slept in the truck. By the third, I started to understand. It wasn't just the tower. The forest itself carried the signal. The hum in the air, the static between branches. It wasn't random. It was speaking, and I'd started to listen. A week later, the dispatch called. "Jack, you up near Lookout 9? "Not lately," I said. "Well, someone's been keying the radio from your channel all night. Thought it was you." "What were they saying?" "Not much. Just kept repeating, 'Fire line's clear, fire line's clear,' over and over." I didn't answer. I just looked toward the ridge where Tower 9 stood, a dark spear against the horizon. It was supposed to be empty, but I could see the faint pulse of light again, once every few seconds. A signal. A heartbeat. That night I drove up the mountain again. The fog was thick enough that my headlights barely cut through, the road curling in on itself like it didn't want me to reach the top. When I finally parked and killed the engine, the silence fell heavy. No crickets, no wind, only that faint hum almost below hearing. I started climbing. Each step creaked like an echo of the voice on the radio. When I reached the top, the door swung open before I touched it. The air inside was colder than the night. My flashlight beam caught something new on the wall. Fresh chalk marks. Dates. Rows and rows of them. All ending the same way. Midnight signal sent. No reply at the desk. The radio clicked once. Then again. Then twice more. Faster this time. I realized it was the same distress signal. One click for help. Over and over. "Who are you?" I asked. The mic shifted on its own, a faint movement like invisible fingers pushing it closer to me. And then the voice came through again. "I can't see the ridge. Fire's spreading." "Cole?" I whispered. "Cole D? You're..." The speaker screeched, still watching. The words didn't sound like speech anymore. They were stretched, warped by distance, by time. I yanked the power cord out, but the sound didn't stop. The entire tower began to hum, wood vibrating beneath my boots. The glass rattled, the air turning thick with heat. I could smell the smoke again, fresh this time. When I turned, I saw flames rising in the tree line below. Real ones. I grabbed the radio handset and called it in, voice shaking. "Fire spotted near Ridge 7, possible spread toward." But my transmission overlapped with another, the same channel. My own voice came back. "Fire spotted near Ridge 7, possible spread," perfectly matched. Same tone, same panic. Then it added one word. Again. The fire burned for 3 days. We never found the ignition point. But when the smoke cleared, Tower 9 was gone. Nothing but charred beams and twisted metal. I told the report team what I saw, but left out the radio, the voice, the badge. They said lightning probably hit it again. That was the official story. I knew better. A few months later, I transferred out of Bitterroot. I told myself I was done, that I'd leave the mountains to their ghosts and start over somewhere flat, somewhere simple. But every forest has a way of reminding you that it remembers. The static never left my ears. Sometimes when I drive at night, I see the faint pulse of an amber light through the tree line. Once I even followed it again, out of habit, out of some twisted sense of duty. And at the end of that dark gravel road, I found another tower. Not the same one, but close enough. Rusted stairs, old wiring, the smell of dust and rain, and carved into the railing the same words as before, still watching. I turned back toward the valley, but the light didn't stop. I didn't go back to that new tower for a while. I told myself it was just my mind trying to fill gaps, seeing ghosts in architecture, hearing echoes in static. But you can only tell yourself that so many times before you start to hear the lie in your own voice. Weeks passed. I worked further south, patrolling burned sections of the forest where blackened trunks stood like gravestones. The fires had been bad that summer, eating through valleys faster than we could track them. I kept my focus on logistics, trail closures, safety inspections, radio checks. I avoided anything with "lookout" in the name. But the mountains don't care about avoidance. They remember patterns. And one night, the pattern came back. I was doing a solo night sweep after a storm. The roads were slick with mud, the pine needles matted down into dark, glistening strips. I'd stopped to clear a fallen branch when I noticed the static again, barely audible, leaking through my handheld radio even though it was switched off. I lifted it, turned it over. The switch was down, but the faint whisper came through the speaker anyway. "Fire lines clear." I froze, water dripping from my jacket sleeve onto the radio. Then, softer, almost apologetic, "Still watching." I stood there in the rain, trying to decide whether to throw the damn thing into the mud or answer it. Instead, I just listened. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't confronting the fear, it's realizing how familiar it's become. That night, I didn't go home. I followed the voice. The signal came and went as I drove higher into the foothills, the static pulsing stronger the closer I got to an old fire road that hadn't been maintained in years. The storm clouds hung low, making the treetops look like they were breathing. At mile marker 47, the signal peaked. That's when I saw the sign, half-rotted, barely standing. Lookout 13. It shouldn't have been there. We'd never had a Tower 13 in the district. Every ranger knows their numbers by heart. But there it was, tilted, nailed into a pine whose bark had been stripped clean in a ring around the base, like something had wrapped it tight and squeezed. I killed the headlights and stepped out. The air was heavy with ozone and sap, sharp enough to sting the back of my throat. Lightning flickered somewhere beyond the ridgeline, just long enough to reveal the outline of a structure above me. Tall, skeletal, unmistakable. A tower. No reports, no listing, nothing on any map. But I could see it, standing against the clouds like a spine of broken bones. And halfway up through the slats, a single light flickered. Amber. Slow. Steady. My boots slipped in the mud as I climbed the hill. Every few steps, I stopped and listened. Branches creaking, water dripping, and beneath it, something else. A rhythm. Not footsteps, more like the deep, hollow thud of wood flexing under weight that shouldn't be there. When I reached the base, I saw something nailed to the first step. A badge, not Cole's. Mine. It looked exactly like the one I wore every day, only darker. Burnt around the edges. And when I picked it up, I realized the back wasn't scratched this time. It was freshly carved. Still here. I don't remember climbing the stairs, but suddenly I was halfway up, the rail slick beneath my palms. My flashlight cut through the rain in pale arcs, catching glimpses of handprints smeared along the walls. Not painted, just pressed into dust and rain as though someone had been feeling their way blindly. The air changed near the top, hotter, humming with that same low static I'd heard through the radio. When I stepped inside, the space felt wrong. It was identical to Tower 9, same desk, same cracked window, same view of endless pine, but it was new. No dust, no rot. The radio on the desk was pristine, polished metal, no rust. The cord coiled perfectly, and from the speaker, a faint breath. Jack. The voice wasn't Cole's this time. It was mine. I froze. The sound looped. My own tone, my own hesitation, the same way I'd said my name on the dispatch line hundreds of times. Jack, come in. Then another voice joined it. The two overlapped like layers of tape. Fire lines clear. Still watching. Jack, come in. I slammed the radio off, but the sound didn't stop. It was in the walls now, vibrating through the floorboards. The amber light above me pulsed in rhythm with the voices, faster, faster, until it became a steady glare. I stepped back, hitting something solid behind me. A man stood in the corner, or what looked like one. The uniform was wrong, torn in places, melted in others. His face was blurred, skin warped like wax near a flame, and his badge was nothing but char. Cole? I whispered. The figure tilted its head as if considering the name. Then it spoke. Not through a mouth, but through the radio still crackling on the desk. I never left. I ran. Down the stairs, down through the mud and pine and lightning. The air burned in my lungs, the ground slipping beneath me. I didn't stop until I reached my truck, slammed the door, and threw the radio out the window. It landed in the mud with a soft hiss, still glowing green. The light from the tower followed me as I drove. I could see it through the mirror, steady, unwavering, even as the rain swallowed everything else. By dawn, it was gone. I filed no report that morning. What would I say? That I'd followed a signal to a tower that shouldn't exist? That I'd spoken to myself through a radio that wasn't plugged in? It sounded like madness, and maybe it was. But that wasn't the end. The forest doesn't deal in endings, only returns. 2 weeks later, the department sent me photos from the aerial survey. One of the technicians had flagged an anomaly. Unrecorded structure near mile 47, the note read. I opened the image, expecting to see the tower again. There was nothing, only trees. But right in the center, between the pines, a thin amber streak cut through the fog. The survey team said it was lens flare. I knew better. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cabin walls creaked with the wind, the same low rhythm as the tower stairs. I tried drowning it out with music, with the TV, anything, but between every sound, I could still hear the static. I turned the radio back on, half hoping for silence. It came alive immediately. Fire lines clear, the voice said. Then, lower, almost a sigh. Still here. I turned the dial to 0, but before it went quiet, one last whisper bled through. Your turn. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the edge of my bed staring at the radio, watching the green pilot light pulse faintly in the dark, like it was breathing. I'd turned the volume all the way down, unplugged it, even pulled the batteries, yet somehow it still hummed. That low electrical sound that isn't quite noise, isn't quite silence. I tried convincing myself that it was all a feedback loop in my head, that after years of isolation and the endless repetition of storms, trails, and static, my brain had built its own radio signal just to have something to answer to. But every time the hum rose a little higher, the air pressure in the cabin changed, enough to make the windows flex, the wood tighten, the air taste faintly metallic. It wasn't in my head. The forest was listening, and it wanted me to answer. At sunrise, I drove down to the district office, pretending everything was fine. I needed noise, people, phones, the scrape of chairs on the floor, anything human. But the first thing I saw when I walked in stopped me cold. Pinned to the bulletin board by the entrance was a notice, Fire Watch Rotation, New Assignments. And next to my name in red pen, someone had written, Lookout 13, Active Duty. I stared at it so long the receptionist finally asked if I was okay. I told her it was a mistake, that there wasn't a Tower 13 in this district. She blinked at me like she didn't understand. You sure, Jack? It's been up there a week. A week, before I'd even seen it. I tore the paper down and went straight to the supervisor's office. But when I opened the door, no one was there. The lights were on, coffee still steaming on the desk, computer humming. A half-filled log sheet sat beside it, the last entry time stamped 0013. The name signed at the bottom was mine. I don't remember writing it. I don't remember being there at all. But the signature was mine, the curve of the J, the uneven pressure from my busted knuckle. Everything. I left the office in silence. The others looked up as I passed, but no one said a word. They just watched. When I stepped outside, the world felt thinner, like the air itself was stretched over something waiting to break through. By noon, I was back on the road. I told myself I was going to the Ranger's Lodge in the next county, that I'd file for leave, maybe check into a motel for a few days. But when I came to the junction, my hands didn't turn the wheel. They held steady, guiding the truck toward the mountain road instead, the one that led back to the tower. I didn't decide to go there. I was already going there. The weather turned fast. By the time I hit mile marker 47, thunder was rolling over the ridge and rain lashed the windshield hard enough to blur the world into motionless gray. I parked by instinct, the same rut in the ground, the same scent of sap and smoke, and climbed out. The forest didn't look like itself anymore. The pines leaned in at angles that defied gravity, their branches woven together above me like a tunnel. The soil underfoot pulsed faintly with heat, as if fire still smoldered far below. And in that fog-thick air, I could hear it again, the hum, louder now, layered with whispers that sounded almost like my own thoughts thrown back at me. Your turn. I followed the sound through the trees, my flashlight beam cutting pale columns through the mist. Every few feet, something flickered at the edge of vision, shadows that didn't belong, movements that didn't make noise. And then as the trees opened, I saw it again. The tower, standing tall and whole, though it had burned to the ground weeks ago. The wood gleamed dark with rain, unscarred. The amber light above flickered steady. No smoke, no fire, only the illusion of something that refused to die. I climbed. Slowly this time, not running, not hiding. My heart was too steady for fear now. It beat with something colder, like acceptance. The static rose with each step until the air itself began to shimmer. When I reached the top, I stopped at the doorway. Inside, everything waited. The same desk, the same window, the same badge lying on the planks. But now there were two radios, one cracked and rusted, the old analog model, and one brand new, its screen glowing green. My name was printed on the call sign label. As soon as I stepped in, the newer radio keyed itself. "Jack," it said in my own voice. "Report fire line status." I didn't move. "Jack," it repeated. And then another voice layered under it, rough, smoke-worn, human. "Still here." I reached for the mic, but the air thickened. It wasn't heat, it was density, pressure, like standing at the bottom of a lake. The shadows in the corners of the room lengthened, rising up until they had shape. 5, 6, maybe more, all wearing ranger uniforms in varying states of decay. Their eyes burned faint amber. I stepped back until my spine hit the window. "What do you want?" I whispered. The static answered, "Keep watch." For how long? The light above pulsed once, then everything flashed white. For a heartbeat, I saw them clearly. Men and women I'd only known through old reports and memorial plaques. Faces I'd read in fire briefings, names that had become statistics. All of them staring straight ahead toward the forest, unblinking. And at their center stood Cole. He turned to me, and for the first time, his voice wasn't through the radio. It came raw and human from his burned throat. "We can't leave it empty." The light flickered again. I don't remember falling, but I woke at the base of the tower near dawn, rain steaming off the wet earth. The forest was still. The tower was gone. Again, nothing but churned mud and a single burned step lying half buried in the ground. My truck was parked where I'd left it. The radio inside was on. I lifted the receiver, my hands trembling. The signal was weak but steady. "Fire line's clear," said the voice. And then softly, "Your shift begins at sundown." That was 6 months ago. I put in for reassignment after that, but no one could find my paperwork. The department said my position's still active, same district, same call sign. Every time I try to contact them, the line drops in static right after they confirm my name. I've stopped sleeping in the cabin. I stay mobile now, keep driving from forest to forest, never in one place more than a night or two. But sometimes, even hundreds of miles away, I'll catch that faint flicker of amber light on a distant ridge. And the radio, no matter what make or model, no matter the channel, will key itself. "Jack," it says. "Report fire line status." And when I don't answer, it always ends the same way. Still watching. I've learned to stop fighting it. Maybe that's the lesson buried in all of this, that the forest doesn't forget its watchmen, that we don't ever really leave our posts. Sometimes I wonder if one night, somewhere out there, another ranger will see my light blinking from a tower that shouldn't exist, and they'll climb to see who's calling. And maybe they'll hear my voice say what I've come to understand best. The fire line's clear, but the watch never ends. The first thing I should tell you is that the map doesn't show it. Sector 9 is a ghost designation, scratched off official documents, deleted from the patrol grid, redacted in every digital system since the early 80s. But if you look close enough at an old laminated terrain map, the kind they used to hand out at ranger stations, you can still see it faintly. A gray rectangle of pine and stone, boxed in by contour lines like a wound someone tried to close. When I got stationed at Coldwater District, nobody said the name out loud. It was just the blocked zone, or the Eastern Ridge. But I saw the file. Every ranger has clearance for historical logs, and I wanted to understand why an entire 20 square miles of forest was still sealed off after 40 years. The report was a single page, photocopied so many times it looked like a smear of ash. The text that remained said only, fatalities, structural compromise, contamination risk, patrol suspended indefinitely. I'd been in this job long enough to know that contamination could mean anything from an old chemical dump to a rabid bear population. But the stories didn't match that. The older rangers, those who'd been here before the government cuts, talked about sounds in the trees, about patrols that never returned, about the ground itself moving. I took those rumors the way most of us do, with a polite nod and the kind of skepticism you wear like armor. But something changed that winter. The blizzard hit in February, hard enough to bury the access roads and knock out radio repeaters across the district. We were told to hold perimeter posts until relief came. 3 days in, a distress beacon started transmitting from the far side of Ridge 9, the coordinates matching the very center of the forbidden sector. I remember the exact sound of it, that high-pitched analog ping breaking through static like Morse code from the grave. We called dispatch. They said no patrols were out there, no operations, no aircraft had gone down. Still, the signal kept repeating. Someone or something was alive in a place that didn't officially exist. That night, the wind made the towers groan. I couldn't sleep, so I stared at the map under a lantern's hiss, tracing the old logging roads that used to snake through the sector before the forest reclaimed them. I told myself it was just interference, maybe a scavenged transponder or a faulty repeater. But the next morning, the beacon had moved, closer. I packed light, thermal gear, compass, shortwave, and a canteen. I didn't file a route report, didn't tell the others. Maybe part of me wanted to see what everyone else was too afraid to. Maybe I just needed to prove that the forest didn't scare me anymore. By noon, I reached the old perimeter gate. It wasn't much, just a row of rotted posts and a rusted sign, half buried in snow. No entry. Federal land restoration in progress. A lie, clearly. There hadn't been restoration crews in decades. I stepped over the wire, and for the first time, I felt something I can't explain. Like the air on that side was thicker. Not colder, just heavier, as if it didn't want to be breathed. The trees changed fast, taller, straighter, darker. Pines so close together they knitted the sky shut. Sound got strange too. My own footsteps echoed wrong, like the ground was hollow beneath the snow. I lost the trail more than once, but the beacon kept guiding me. Every few hundred feet, that ping crackled through the static, louder, clearer, until by sunset it wasn't static anymore. It was a voice. At first I thought it was radio bleed, a garbled male voice cutting in and out of frequency. But when I stopped moving, it stopped too. Then, faintly, it whispered my name. I froze. I hadn't transmitted, I wasn't on any shared channel. The forest went dead quiet after that. No wind, no birds, no creaking trees, just that sense that the silence itself was listening. My breath fogged up my visor, and for a second, I swore I smelled something warm, like wet fur left too long in the sun. Then the signal jumped again. I followed it downhill into a ravine where the snow turned to slush around a circle of blackened pines. At the center was what looked like an old ranger tower, collapsed halfway onto its side. Metal twisted, steps snapped, the cabin torn open like it had been peeled from within. A shredded antenna hung from a cable, still pulsing with faint red light. That was where the beacon came from. But when I got close enough to see the ID tag on the transponder, my stomach turned. It wasn't government issue. It was a personal emergency locator, a model discontinued decades ago. The serial number ended in 82. I radioed it in, but the line was dead. No static, just silence. I remember kneeling in that wreckage, brushing off frost from the equipment panel, and seeing something else, handprints frozen into the metal siding, dozens of them, all small, all facing inward. It took everything I had not to panic. I tried logic first. Maybe campers had trespassed here years ago, maybe kids, but the pattern was too precise, too deliberate. They were pressed flat in a circle, as if every one of them had been touching the tower at the same moment, listening for something inside. And when I put my own hand against the cold steel, I heard it too. A low vibration, a hum that wasn't mechanical, more like breath drawn through stone. I don't remember leaving that ravine, only that I woke up later in the dark with my pack gone and snow falling again. My compass spun uselessly. The trees around me looked identical in every direction, but I could see light through the branches, orange and flickering. A fire. I pushed toward it, boots crunching through layers of ice until I stumbled into a clearing I didn't recognize. A small camp burned at the center, no tent, no gear, just a single tin mug half melted into the snow. The flames were wrong, though. Too still, too bright, like a flare frozen mid-combustion. And in the heat shimmer above it, I saw movement. Just a shape at first, then a silhouette standing behind the fire. It was wearing a ranger's jacket. I called out. The figure didn't move. The air wavered around it, that same heavy pressure pressing into my chest. I took one step forward, and the fire blinked out, just gone. One instant there, the next swallowed by black. What remained was the smell, sulfur and burned hair, and something else, a voice behind me, low, close. You shouldn't be here. I turned, but there was no one, only the snow hissing where the fire had been. Then came the radio crackle again, the same frequency, the same distortion, except now it wasn't repeating coordinates. It was playing back my own voice from earlier that day, over and over, warped and distant. I'm entering the perimeter now. I listened until my skin crawled. It wasn't playback. The voice was still speaking, slightly delayed, like someone following my steps and transmitting them a few seconds later. That's when I ran. Branches snapped under my boots, shadows stretching with each breath. I didn't stop until the forest thinned and I saw the faint reflection of water ahead, a frozen lake. I almost collapsed there, on the edge of that mirror-flat ice, gulping air so cold it burned. The radio went quiet at last, leaving only my heartbeat and the faint groan of ice shifting underfoot. Then, across the lake, I saw lanterns, 3 of them, swinging slowly in a line, just above the surface. I shouted, maybe for help, maybe to hear my own voice. The lights kept moving, perfectly parallel until I realized they weren't reflections, they were beneath the ice, moving closer. The lights drifted like slow, patient fish beneath the ice, pale and gold, smearing in the warped glass surface. My breath caught because I could see shapes behind them, long and distorted, walking instead of swimming. The ice moaned again, not from cold, but like something was pressing upward. I backed away, boots crunching through the crusted snow, until I hit the tree line. The forest behind me breathed. I don't know how else to describe it. Air moving where air shouldn't. An exhale that made the branches ripple. When I looked back, one of the lights had stopped. It hovered just below the surface directly in front of me, and then it blinked. Not a reflection, not distortion, an actual blink, like a shuttered eye under frozen glass. The ice around it went gray. Something touched my ankle. I stumbled back, half falling, kicking at the snow. A root, I thought, a branch. But when I looked down, the ground was flat, Smooth. The feeling didn't go away. It slid higher, an invisible hand tightening around my boot. The pressure made the bone in my shin ache. I drew my sidearm and fired into the ice. The sound shattered the silence like thunder in a tomb. Cracks spread outward, black veins spidering beneath the surface. For a moment, everything went still again. Then the lights vanished. I stood there shaking, barrel smoking in the cold. I knew what protocol said. Return immediately, radio for extraction, file a breach report. But the path behind me was gone. My tracks had already been erased by the snow, or maybe they just shifted. I turned in circles, trying to reorient by the stars, but even the sky looked wrong. No moon, just a faint red smear near the horizon, pulsing like a wound. That's when I heard footsteps, soft, steady, matching my pace. Every time I turned, they stopped. I told myself it was echo, that the snow was amplifying sound. But then I saw breath rising behind a nearby tree trunk. Not mine. Too high, too far. I called out again, "Who's there?" No answer, just the faint pop of freezing sap in the branches. I flicked my flashlight toward the sound, and for a fraction of a second, I saw boots. Government issue. Legs up to the knees, everything above lost in darkness. The stance was too still. The beam flickered, caught something metallic on the chest. A badge. My badge. The light died like the batteries drained all at once. I dropped it, drew a flare from my belt, struck it alive. The red glow flooded the trees, and I realized there were more shapes, 5, maybe 6, standing in a semicircle just beyond the light's edge. Faces obscured, outlines ragged like the forest itself had grown them. None of them moved. None blinked. The flare hissed, burning down faster than it should. The air around me stank of sulfur again. I backed up until my spine met the trunk of a pine. That's when they stepped forward, in unison. And every one of them had my face. I don't remember pulling the trigger, but I remember the gun clicking empty, the smoke, the snow bursting like ash. When I opened my eyes, the flare was out, and the forest was silent again. No footprints, no bodies. Only the faint smell of burnt powder and something older, like wet stone. I started walking, I don't know how long. The compass needle spun endlessly, but I could still feel the slope of the land leading downward. The trees grew thinner until I saw something unnatural ahead, a mound of earth in a near-perfect circle, half covered by snowdrift. A bunker door. Steel. Rusted. The hinges wept brown icicles. No markings except for a stenciled number barely visible beneath grime. 9. My heart pounded. It wasn't supposed to exist. No structure was listed in this region, and yet there it was, sealed but breathing faint condensation through cracks in the welds. I should have left. Should have turned back, found my way to open ground. But something about it felt expectant, like it had been waiting for me. The handle resisted at first, frozen in place, but when I leaned my full weight into it, it broke free with a hollow groan. The smell that poured out was rot and metal and something sweet underneath, like decomposing fruit. My flashlight came back to life just enough to show a staircase spiraling down into black. The walls were lined with frost and handprints again, larger this time, some smeared, some dug deep enough to tear the paint. I could see where nails had caught and left scratches like tally marks. I descended. The deeper I went, the warmer it got. My breath stopped fogging. My ears started ringing. The hum I'd heard in the tower returned. Faint, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something enormous buried under rock. The stairs ended at a long corridor. The floor was damp, reflecting my light in a trembling mirror. Pipes ran along the ceiling, some still dripping, some ruptured and bleeding black water. I walked until the corridor opened into a large chamber. That's where I found the boots. Dozens of them. Military grade, ranger issue, miners, even hiking boots, all lined up in neat rows along the walls. Some still had feet in them. The rest were empty, filled with dirt. A table sat in the middle of the room, covered in papers so old they disintegrated when I touched them. I could still make out fragments of typewritten lines, containment protocols, organic mimicry, response team missing. And at the bottom, handwritten in red ink, "Do not answer when it calls your name." Something moved in the dark corner of the room, just beyond the spill of my flashlight. A dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across wet stone. I aimed the beam, and the light trembled. A figure was crouched there, naked, skin the color of the wall, its back rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths. It turned its head too slowly, and the face that looked back was mine. Not similar, exact. The same scar across the jaw, the same bloodshot eyes, even the same rip in the sleeve of my parka. But there was no recognition in its stare, only hunger or curiosity. I froze, every instinct screaming to run, but the air pressed down on me again, thick as oil. It started crawling forward, knees and hands scraping across concrete, moving like a child imitating an adult. "Don't," I whispered. It stopped, tilted its head. Then it smiled, slow and human and wrong. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was perfect. My own tone, my cadence, everything. It stood up in a single smooth motion and began walking toward me, barefoot, silent except for that wet sound of skin on concrete. I lifted the gun again out of reflex, knowing it was empty. My flashlight flickered, and in that brief, dark blink, the thing closed half the distance. Another blink. It was right in front of me. I swung the light up, point blank, and saw its eyes. Black pupils spilling into the whites, too wide, swallowing light. The face rippled, as if the flesh underneath were trying to rearrange itself. I ran. The corridor seemed longer this time. Every step echoed twice, once real, once delayed, like something just behind me was mimicking my pace again. I didn't dare look back. I hit the stairs 2 at a time, lungs burning, light flashing off wet metal walls. The air was hot now, thick with the smell of copper and smoke. When I burst through the bunker door, the cold hit like a slap. Night had fallen completely, the forest bathed in that red glow again. But now I could see movement in the trees, hundreds of faint silhouettes standing between the trunks, motionless. And from all around came that same voice, layered and overlapping, speaking from every direction at once. "You shouldn't be here." The sound pressed into my skull, vibrating through bone. I dropped to my knees, covered my ears, but it was already inside me. My radio hissed back to life, broadcasting not words but breathing. My own, recorded, delayed. Something touched my shoulder, light, almost gentle. When I looked up, there was nothing but the snow and the red horizon. The forest exhaled. I kept moving, though I can't tell you how. My legs carried me through that forest like they no longer belonged to me, some old survival mechanism running on fumes. The cold came back fast, sharp enough to sting my eyes, and the red light from the horizon thinned into gray. The silhouettes vanished with it, fading like smoke into the trees. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined everything, that maybe I'd gone too long without sleep. But when I looked down, there were prints beside mine, bare feet in the snow, dozens of them, each one turned in the same direction I was walking. I didn't try to follow them, I just needed to get out. The terrain was unfamiliar now, no landmarks, no ridgelines I recognized. Even the trees felt wrong, spaced evenly, as if planted by hand. My GPS blinked a red error where coordinates should be. The radio whispered sometimes, faint exhalations between bursts of static, but I didn't dare respond. Dawn never came. The light just stayed dim, caught in that endless blue hour where everything is visible but colorless. I could feel my sanity thinning. The air carried a low vibration, constant, like power lines above the canopy, but there were no wires here, no roads, nothing human. At some point, I realized the sound wasn't external. It was inside my head. I started humming under my breath to drown it out, an old campfire song from training days. It didn't help. The hum rose in pitch until it matched my voice, harmonizing with it, mocking me. My vision blurred at the edges. The forest seemed to ripple like heat haze. Then I smelled it, wet fur, rot, sulfur, and knew I wasn't alone again. A shape flickered between the trees. Not fast, not animal. It moved like it wanted to be seen, stepping just far enough into the open that I could glimpse its outline. It was wearing a ranger's coat again, hood up, gloved hands hanging at its sides. I shouted, maybe begged, "Identify yourself!" It raised one hand in greeting. The glove slipped, and I saw the hand underneath, translucent, bloodless, fingers fused like melted wax. I fired a warning shot. The sound barely echoed. The figure tilted its head, then took another step closer. The snow beneath it didn't crunch. I blinked once, and it was gone. But I could still hear its breathing. The smell got stronger. My eyes watered. I turned to run and almost tripped over something in the snow. A metal signpost, bent and half buried. I brushed it off and read the lettering stamped into rusted steel. U.S. Geological Survey Station, Sector 9 Perimeter, abandoned 1982. Underneath, someone had carved words into the metal with a knife. We weren't alone down there. My mind kept circling back to the bunker, to the papers on that table. Containment, organic mimicry. If those things came from below ground, then they were still here, waiting. Maybe they'd been waiting since 1982. I kept moving west, following what I hoped was downhill terrain. The snow deepened, slowing me down. My flashlight died for good. Without light, the dark started to breathe again, whispering through the branches in a language made of wind and teeth. Hours or days later, I found a fence line. Chain link, rusted through in spots, curling inward like it had been pulled from the inside. A faded government placard dangled from one post. Radiological hazard. Keep out. Liar, I thought. Nothing about this place felt like radiation. It felt sentient. The hum inside my skull deepened. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it didn't help. That's when I realized the vibration had a pattern. Pulses evenly spaced like a code. My body started responding to it. My fingers twitched in rhythm, my jaw clenched in time. I stumbled along the fence until I reached a break in the links. The ground there was scorched black, as if something had burned a perfect circle through snow and soil. In the center stood a hatch, square and metal, identical to the one I'd already opened. But this one was sealed tight with fresh weld marks. The air above it shimmered, distorting the trees behind it like heat rising from asphalt. And I could hear voices beneath it. Not whispers this time. Full conversations, indistinct, overlapping, dozens of them, like a crowded room just beyond the metal. Every voice was mine. I fell backwards, scrambling away, ears ringing with the echo of my own words. They weren't random phrases. They were memories. Recordings of things I'd said over the radio and debriefings to my team. Every mistake I'd ever confessed, every lie I'd ever told. The chorus grew louder, synchronized with the hum, until I thought my skull would split. Then suddenly, silence. The metal under the snow groaned. The welds cracked, one by one, with sharp metallic pings. A seam opened. Heat spilled out, moist, unnatural heat that smelled of iron and decay. I held my breath, half expecting something to crawl out, but nothing did. The hatch just pulsed once like a heartbeat under metal, then went still again. I ran until my lungs gave out. The landscape changed again, snow thinning, trees bending away from the hills, revealing open rock and a narrow canyon I didn't remember. The air was clearer here, the hum weaker. I followed the canyon floor until I saw the remains of an old outpost, collapsed roof, rusted generator, a flagpole without a flag. Inside the shack, the walls were lined with equipment, radio sets, gas masks, decontamination suits. A half-burned logbook sat open on the desk, pages fused together by water damage. Only the last entry was legible, written in trembling ink. Containment breach confirmed. Mimics exhibiting speech acquisition. Recommend full sector quarantine. No survivors. No date, no signature. I tore the page out and folded it into my pocket, though I don't know why. Maybe proof. Maybe guilt. When I stepped outside again, it was snowing softly. For a brief second, it felt almost peaceful, the kind of silence the forest used to have before all this. Then I noticed something moving in the flakes. Not just falling snow, rising snow. Little spirals lifting off the ground, catching on unseen air currents. They formed shapes, vague human outlines, tall, hollow. I stood frozen as one drifted close enough to brush against my sleeve, leaving frost that hissed like acid. The rest followed, circling, whispering in that soft voice made of wind. Stay. Stay. The sound wasn't pleading. It was possessive. I tore free and bolted into the canyon. The whispers turned into laughter, high, childlike, echoing off the stone walls. I ran until my legs buckled, until the world tilted and went black. When I woke, I was back at the tree line. No canyon, no shack, just forest again, endless and quiet. My pack was gone, my gun was gone, but the folded paper was still in my pocket, soaked with sweat and blood. It was darker now, no horizon glow, no stars, the kind of dark that eats sound. I could feel the cold against my eyes like frost behind the lids. I tried to stand, but the ground beneath me vibrated again, a low rumble that felt alive. Somewhere nearby, something breathed out, a long, slow exhalation that made the pines sway. I looked up and saw movement in the canopy, shapes hanging there, suspended like cocoons, faintly glowing from within. Faces pressed against the membrane, faces that looked human, familiar. One of them opened its eyes, and it was mine. Its eyes blinked once, mine, exactly mine. Then the entire cocoon shivered. The membrane split from top to bottom with a soft, wet sound, and something heavy dropped from the canopy. I stumbled backward as it landed in the snow, knees first, naked, trembling. Steam rose from its skin. I couldn't breathe. It looked up at me with those same eyes, mouth twitching like it was learning how to work. Its first sound wasn't speech. It was breath, shallow and rehearsed like it was practicing. Then, in a whisper too thin to be human, it said, "You left us." It crawled forward, each movement wrong in some way, as if it had studied walking but never done it before. Its skin was pale, veins black like cracks in porcelain. I backed away, hand instinctively reaching for a weapon I didn't have anymore. Behind me, the forest exhaled again. Every cocoon hanging from the trees began to move, one by one, swaying gently in rhythm. The sound of the membrane tearing multiplied, soft, wet, steady, as more shapes slipped down to the ground. Some stood, some only twitched. I turned and ran. They didn't chase, they didn't need to. The forest moved for them. Branches shifted out of my way, roots slid beneath my boots. The ground itself tilted, funneling me downhill into the same ravine I thought I'd escaped nights ago. But it wasn't snowing anymore. The ravine had changed. The trees were gone, replaced by black stone walls slick with condensation. The air burned my throat, thick with the smell of rot and iron. At the bottom lay a pool of water, too dark, too still. My reflection stared back, except it wasn't me. It smiled. Then the water rippled from beneath, and the smile widened, splitting the reflection's face open like a mask tearing at the seams. A hand broke through, pale, long-fingered, and another followed. I stumbled backward as a figure rose out of the pool, like dripping black liquid, its mouth still carved into that smile. It wore my uniform, not just any, today's uniform. The same tear on the sleeve, the same mud stains on the knees. "Help me," it said, using my voice. "Please, help me." I should have run again. I didn't. Some part of me still clung to logic, to reason, to the part of training that said no one gets left behind. I reached for it, stupidly, and its hand shot out faster than reflex. The grip was ice and fire at once, burning and freezing through my skin. Then it pulled. The world inverted. I hit the water, but there was no surface. Just pressure, blackness, and sound. Screaming, hundreds of overlapping screams, merging into a single endless exhale. I clawed upward, but my arms met resistance like thick fabric instead of water. And then I was standing. Not swimming, not sinking, just standing in the middle of an underground corridor. My lungs heaved, but I wasn't wet. The air was still, the walls concrete and slick with something organic. Lights buzzed overhead, old fluorescent tubes flickering like the pulse of a dying animal. I knew this place. The bunker. Only it wasn't empty now. Rows of figures lined the hallway, each standing at perfect attention. Some wore ranger uniforms, some wore mining gear, others wore nothing but pale skin. All of them had the same face, mine, but older, younger, twisted in different ways. Some smiled, some wept, some whispered silently to themselves. As I passed, their heads turned in unison. One reached out, grabbing my sleeve. Its voice rasped like broken glass. "You're late." Then, before I could respond, every light in the corridor went out. Total darkness. A mechanical hum started up behind me, deep, rhythmic, shaking the floor. I fumbled for my flashlight, but the switch was already on. Dead batteries again. The sound grew louder until I could feel it inside my teeth. A vibration that wasn't quite noise, but wasn't silence either. Then the lights came back, strobing this time, flashing fast enough that movement became a blur. The corridor was empty, no bodies, no uniforms, just the echo of that humming pulse. I kept walking because standing still felt worse. The corridor led to a door marked Level 2 Research. It was slightly ajar. The air seeping from the crack was warm and smelled faintly of decay and ozone. I pushed it open. Inside was a control room, or what was left of one. Machines melted into walls, monitors fused to their casings, black wires hanging like entrails. At the center of the room stood a metal chair bolted to the floor, restraints snapped and rusted. A small recording unit sat on a desk nearby, its indicator light blinking green. It was still powered. I pressed play. Static, then a voice. Male, hoarse, desperate. "This is Dr. Kendall, Project Lead, Containment Team 6. If you're hearing this, you're in the wrong place. It's learned how to use us, our voices, our faces, our everything. It's not one thing anymore. It's all of us." A long pause, then whispering, faint but close to the mic, "It doesn't need the surface. It has memory now." The tape cut to silence. The green light stayed on, pulsing slower, like it was syncing with my heartbeat. Then, without me touching anything, it started recording again, and the voice it captured was mine. "This is Ranger Hayes," I heard myself say. "Sector 9, containment compromised, requesting evacuation." My mouth went dry. The recorder repeated the message again, looping it, distorting it, until it didn't sound like me anymore, just a guttural tone, stretching my voice into something almost inhuman. The words warped into shapes that didn't belong to language. Then the screen on one of the dead monitors flickered to life. It showed the control room from above. I saw myself standing there, hand still on the recorder. But behind me, behind the me in the footage, was another figure. It leaned close to the camera, face hidden in shadow, before whispering something I couldn't hear. Then the feed cut out. I turned slowly, flashlight raised, though I knew it was dead. Nothing there, just the dark doorway I'd entered through. But the air had changed. It was thicker again, humming faintly with that impossible resonance. Then a voice spoke from the hall. "You left us." The same phrase, the same tone. I ran past the table, past the chair, through the corridor that no longer seemed to follow geometry. Corners bent inward, walls expanded and contracted like lungs. The hum grew louder until I couldn't tell if it came from the facility or my own body. I don't remember reaching the stairs, only the blinding white light that hit me when I did. For a moment, I thought I'd escaped, that it was sunrise again, that I'd broken free of that underground nightmare. But it wasn't sunlight. It was the surface reflected through ice. I was beneath the frozen lake. Above me, shadows moved, figures walking in slow circles on the surface, their faces distorted by the refracted light. One knelt down, placing a hand against the ice, and I realized I was mirroring the gesture from below. It was me. A dozen versions of me walked that frozen world above, while below, dozens more watched through the ice, waiting for the surface to crack. I pressed my palm against the barrier, needing to feel something real. The cold bit deep enough to split the skin. Blood spread in slow red threads through the ice. And from somewhere in that endless depth below, something answered. The vibration shifted pitch, rising into a sound that almost resembled a word. Not English. Not human. But it understood me. The sound filled everything. My ears, my bones, the air between heartbeats. It wasn't a roar or a voice. It was both. A vast, slow intelligence breathing through the miles of stone and ice. The ice above me began to tremble, spiderweb cracks blooming outward from where my blood touched. The figures walking on the surface froze mid-step. For a moment, everything held still, like the world was deciding whether to end or continue. Then the ice broke, not explosively, just a slow, deep peel, a sound like the planet unzipping. Water poured through the fracture, rushing around me, dragging me up into the light. My body spun through shards of freezing glass until I surfaced gasping, half blind, lungs seizing from the cold. But the lake wasn't the same lake anymore. The shorelines were wrong. Closer, sharper. The trees leaned inward like they were watching. The snow was gone. The ground steamed. It smelled like metal and something ancient underneath. I crawled to the bank, coughing, shivering, staring at my hands. The blood had washed away, but the skin was cracked in a pattern I didn't recognize, thin black lines branching like veins of coal beneath the flesh. When I touched them, I felt vibration, tiny pulsing rhythms that matched the hum I'd heard below. My radio crackled again. Hayes, do you copy? Static. This is base command. Sector signals restored. Do you copy? My voice wouldn't work. I pressed the transmitter anyway, every nerve in my arm tingling with that same pulse. I'm here, I croaked. Sector 9, compromised. More static then. Negative, Hayes. Sector 9 was decommissioned in 1982. Identify yourself. The word caught. Something shifted in my throat. I'm Ranger Hayes. Silence, then a soft click. Copy that, the voice said, but there was no relief in it. No recognition. Hold position. Retrieval team en route. I dropped the radio. The voice didn't sound human, not entirely. I looked around. The forest had gone still again, but the air shimmered faintly like heat rising from asphalt. I could see faint distortions moving through it. Human outline lines, transparent, pacing between the trees. They made no sound, but every time they passed, I smelled the same things: sulfur, iron, and wet fur. The hum grew louder. And then I saw the lights again, 3 golden glows hovering low to the ground. I thought they were lanterns until they blinked in unison. They were eyes, half buried in the mist, reflecting me back at myself. I started to move, but my legs felt detached, slow. Every step left behind a dark stain in the earth that hissed faintly as it sank. I realized the ground wasn't soil anymore. It was skin. Stretched, porous, faintly warm. My boots sank an inch deeper, and I felt it pulse around me, as though the forest was drawing breath through the terrain. I kept walking. What else was there to do? The trees thinned ahead, and I saw the old observation tower again, the one that had collapsed days ago. Except now it stood upright, whole, shining faintly in the sickly light. The beacon on its antenna blinked red, perfectly in rhythm with the pulse in my hands. Something inside me wanted to climb it, needed to. The first step groaned under my weight, but held. I climbed, slow, deliberate, every motion echoing too loudly in the still air. By the time I reached the platform, my breath was ragged, and the pulse under my skin had synced perfectly with the tower's hum. From up there, I saw everything. Sector 9 stretched beneath me, no longer forest but a basin, a vast depression of black rock and movement. The earth itself was shifting in slow, circular motions, like muscle beneath translucent skin. And in the center, where the bunker had been, stood something rising. It wasn't structure or creature. It was both. Segments of metal fused with veins of stone, an enormous shape pressing up through the crust. Faces rippled across its surface, human faces, hundreds of them, opening and closing like mouths. Some screamed, some smiled, some whispered the same phrase over and over. You left us. I realized then that the thing below hadn't been sealed away. It had been fed. For 40 years, every echo, every memory, every missing ranger had become part of it. The forest wasn't guarding the bunker. The forest was the bunker, expanded outward, digesting the land one thought at a time, and I was part of it now. The radio crackled again. A new voice, female this time, calm, controlled. Ranger Hayes, confirm your location. We're approaching the perimeter. I stared at the horizon. A convoy of headlights glowed faintly through the mist. Trucks, maybe military, moving in formation. If they came here, they'd join it. They'd feed it. I pressed the transmitter, but the words came out wrong, staggered between breaths. Do not enter. Seal it. Burn it. Don't. Static cut me off. The hum surged so violently it knocked me to my knees. The tower shook, metal screaming as the ground below shifted again. The basin was opening, the faces folding inward, forming a vast hollow that pulsed like a throat. And from that depth came light, white, blinding, rising like a second sun. I felt the pull immediately. Every cell in my body leaned toward it, that terrible gravity of understanding. Images flickered behind my eyes. Old patrols disappearing into fog, radios transmitting dead voices, the moment I crossed that rusted gate and never really came back. The thing below wanted witnesses. That was the truth of it. It needed us to see it, to speak it, to remember it. Every ranger who'd vanished had been another mouth for it to speak through. I understood then why no one had been assigned here since 1982, why the files were redacted. It wasn't about danger, it was about infection. It spreads through memory, through telling. The hum changed again, higher, closer to a heartbeat than a sound. My hands trembled violently, the cracks in my skin widened, bleeding black now instead of red. My reflection in the metal railing looked wrong, its mouth moving half a second before mine did. I pressed my forehead against the cold steel, whispering to myself, "Stay human, stay me." The reflection smiled. Behind me, the light flared once more, and the sound stopped entirely. Silence, pure, absolute, the kind that erases time. When I opened my eyes, it was dawn. The basin was gone. The forest looked normal again. Birds were calling. Snow drifted. My truck sat idling at the edge of the clearing like I'd never left it. I don't remember climbing down. I don't remember walking back. But when I opened the cab door, the radio was still on, faint static filling the cabin. Then my own voice came through it. "This is Ranger Hayes, Coldwater District. Routine patrol complete. No anomalies to report." I froze. That wasn't a recording. It was transmitting. Live. I looked down at my hands. The black lines had faded, but the vibration was still there, deep inside the bone. The radio clicked again. "Copy that, Hayes. Welcome back. You're cleared to resume duties in Sector 9. Static. Then the voice added, softer, almost kind. "You've always been here." The transmission cut. I shut off the engine and just listened to the forest breathe. The air smelled clean, pine and cold water, but underneath it lingered something else, wet metal, faint sulfur, and the sweet rot of fruit gone too long in the sun. It's quiet now, has been for days, but when I sleep I dream of that hum beneath the earth, steady as a heartbeat, and every morning the map on my dashboard shows a new mark, another gray rectangle like a scar, unlabeled, spreading outward from where Sector 9 used to be. I think the land is still remembering, and I think it remembers me. I never thought fear could live in a place I'd called home for years. My name is, well, it doesn't matter. I've been a forest ranger in the northern reaches of Montana for over a decade, walking trails that twist through dense pine and spruce, tracing streams so cold they bite through gloves, and patrolling areas that most people only glimpse from the windows of their cars. I thought I knew the forests, every shadow, every rustle, every scent. I thought the wilderness was predictable, if harsh. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. It started in the middle of a dry October, when the sun dips behind the ridges early, leaving the valleys under a permanent bruised twilight. I'd just finished a late shift hiking a boundary line along the ridge above our ranger station. The air smelled like wet leaves and pine sap, sharp, almost medicinal, and a light fog pressed down, curling around the trunks like ghostly fingers. I was tired, but I liked the silence that came with the fall. The wildlife slows down in October, and you can hear the forest breathing. When I returned to the station, a small, squat building of weathered timber at the edge of a clearing, I noticed something I hadn't before. The air smelled wrong, like burnt hair and iron, but faintly, almost sweetly. My stomach tightened. I chalked it up to the old wiring in the building. The heater had a habit of sending odd smells into the cabin when it kicked on. I dropped my pack and flicked on the lights. Everything looked normal. The office was quiet, still. But then I noticed it. The floor grate near the back corner, the one I'd never paid much attention to, was slightly shifted. I knelt and pressed on it. It moved more than I expected. Cold air seeped up from below, carrying a damp, earthy scent that made my stomach churn. I froze, thinking maybe a critter had dug underneath, but there was something about it. Deliberate, almost inviting. My rational mind screamed, "It's just an old building. There are old maintenance tunnels beneath most ranger stations." But a part of me recoiled, instinct tightening like a fist around my ribs. I pressed my ear to the floor. At first there was nothing. Then a sound, a faint scuffling, like claws across stone. My heart caught in my throat. I pulled back. No animals in Montana make that noise, at least not in the dead of night when the station is silent. I wanted to leave it, ignore it, call it imagination, but curiosity Dangerous Curiosity 1. I grabbed a flashlight from the desk drawer and knelt again. The tunnel was smaller than I expected, just wide enough to squeeze through. The air that pressed out smelled musty, decayed, almost metallic. I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to go down there, but I couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when something was down there. I slid the grate fully open and aimed my flashlight into the black. The beam cut through the darkness to reveal stone walls, damp and slick. The tunnel curved sharply, disappearing into a shadow that seemed to breathe. I shivered and forced my shoulders down to squeeze in. The air was cold, damp, and the smell intensified. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Somewhere in the dark, I thought I heard it. A low exhale, almost human and almost animal, but neither. I swallowed hard. The rational part of my mind ran through possibilities: a trapped animal, a homeless person, some old ventilation shaft. But the deeper I crawled, the more the darkness seemed alive, pressing in against my skin, whispering with the rustle of something unseen. My fingers grazed the stone walls, slick with moisture. A thought struck me. Tunnels are designed to trap, to confuse. I was halfway in when I saw movement. A shadow shifted at the far curve, impossibly fast. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I froze. "Hello?" I croaked. No answer. Only silence. The air itself felt thicker now, as if the tunnel had grown narrower, the ceiling lowering, suffocating. My flashlight flickered once, twice. I shook it. Then I saw the eyes. Not human, too large, too luminescent, reflecting the beam like twin lanterns in the dark. I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe shock, maybe a fatal arrogance, but I stared back. The thing stepped forward, hulking, broad-shouldered, covered in matted hair that glistened with the tunnel's moisture. It made no sound, no growl, nothing. Yet I felt the weight of a predator's focus, heavy and inescapable. I remember thinking, this is a creature no one believes in. A forest legend, a story whispered among rangers to scare rookies. And yet, there it was. My skin crawled as it tilted its head, eyes locking with mine, intelligent and ancient. My mind screamed at me to retreat, but my legs felt rooted to the stone floor. Then it moved, a step closer, and the tunnel seemed to exhale. The smell hit me fully now. Rotting earth, blood, something wild. I stumbled backward, tripping over uneven stone. My flashlight clattered to the ground and rolled out of reach, illuminating the creature's legs, long and bent at odd angles, hair dark and dripping. My heart pounded in my ears. I scrambled to my feet, lunging back toward the entrance. The tunnel seemed endless. I don't know how I made it out, only that I clawed my way through the muck and darkness until the grate loomed above me. My hands shook as I pushed it closed, slamming it into place. I leaned against it, chest heaving, eyes watering. Outside, the station was quiet, the fog curling through the clearing. Everything looked normal. Nothing had changed. Nothing ever would, except me. I told no one that night. I cleaned my gear, poured coffee, and sat by the heater, shaking. My rational mind demanded an explanation, anything. Earthquake, animal, a vivid hallucination from fatigue. But I couldn't shake the eyes. They burned into my memory, luminous and knowing, like it had been waiting. And I realized something else, a truth I didn't want to admit. I wasn't sure the tunnel wanted me to leave. Days passed, and I tried to return to routine. I patrolled the ridges, checked the streams, cataloged wildlife, but the tunnel haunted me. Every sound became suspicion, every shadow a threat. Footsteps on the porch made my stomach clench. Sometimes late at night, I thought I saw movement beneath the floorboards of the station itself. Small glimpses, a flash of fur or bone. And I knew it hadn't left. It was waiting. Always waiting. The next encounter came weeks later. I was making a routine check of a remote campsite along the edge of the national forest. The area was empty, stripped of visitors by the early cold. Fallen leaves swirled in the wind. My radio crackled with static, nothing else. That's when I heard the sound, knocking. 3 distinct knocks, then a pause, then 3 more. They came from the fire pit, from the metal grate over the ground. Not a person's rhythm, but precise, deliberate, blood cold. I approached cautiously, flashlight cutting swaths through the fog. The grate was secure, locked as always. No one was there. The knocking stopped the moment I reached it. My skin crawled, a shiver moving up my spine. I knew, even without seeing it, that whatever haunted the ranger station had found me here, or at least was aware. Night fell fast. I stayed until dark, patrolling, flashlight in hand, each step a calculation. My mind raced with possibilities, another ranger playing a prank, wildlife, hallucination. But rationality faltered the moment I noticed footprints, large, humanoid, but with toes too long, nails sharp, pressed into the soft earth around the fire pit. My stomach turned. They weren't human. I left that night shaken, but the forest didn't let me go. The whispers returned with the wind, the brush rustled with intent, and shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. I began to dream of the tunnel, the creature waiting, its eyes glowing in the black. In my dreams, I would crawl through its passages, chase through endless corridors until I awoke gasping, drenched in sweat, the heater rattling in the dead of night. It was during one of these nights, weeks later, that I finally realized the depth of the forest's hold on me. A call came over the radio, a hiker missing near the northern ridge. I grabbed my pack, radio in hand, flashlight ready. The forest was alive, more oppressive than usual, branches clawing at my coat, fog pressing cold against my cheeks. As I searched, I noticed something impossible. Every time I rounded a bend, I ended up back where I started. Paths I had walked hundreds of times now looped like a maze designed to trap. And then I saw them, eyes luminous and intent, watching from the tree line, reflecting moonlight. The creature, or perhaps another, moved silently, shadow to shadow, always just out of reach. I called into the forest, my voice cracking, but no answer came, only the rustle of leaves and the distant crack of a branch. Fear burned through me, sharper than anything I'd felt before. I don't know how long I walked, how long I ran. The forest blurred, my mind fractured. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. The wilderness isn't just a home for the living. It's a cathedral for the unknown, the hidden, and those who think they understand it are merely visitors. I was a visitor, and I had wandered too far into its heart. I finally made it back to the station long after midnight, the fog thick and heavy, a cloak that hid the familiar from me. Every shadow seemed elongated, warped by the dim light of my flashlight. I stumbled over roots and fallen branches, as if the forest itself was rearranging its floor just to trip me. My lungs burned, my hands were raw from gripping the flashlight, and my mind refused to stop replaying the eyes that followed me, intelligent, patient, unyielding. I knew they hadn't blinked once. Inside the station, the familiar smells of pine cleaner and old wood offered little comfort. I collapsed at the desk, radio static still buzzing in my ears, that heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped animal. I wanted to call for backup, to bring in another ranger, but something inside me, pride, stubbornness, or sheer terror, kept me from it. The tunnel had taught me a lesson. Some things weren't meant to be shared. If anyone else saw it, they would never look at the forest the same way again. I couldn't bear to burden anyone with what I had seen. Sleep was impossible that night. I paced the office, listening for the slightest sound. A knock, a scuff, a breath in the dark. But there was nothing. Nothing except the low hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the building settling. My mind, however, was alive with the memory of those eyes. They had watched me, waited, and now I felt as though they had followed me back into my dreams. The following week, I tried to get back to normal. I patrolled the ridgelines, checked in with hikers, inspected the streams for erosion, and cataloged wildlife. Yet every step through the forest felt heavy. The wind no longer whispered, it murmured secrets just out of reach. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my pulse spike. I began to notice things I hadn't before, the strange absence of birds in certain clearings, the perfect circles of stones in the woods that looked too deliberate to be natural. And then there were the sounds. Subtle, almost polite, but impossible. Something walking just out of view, shifting the leaves in unnatural patterns. One night, about a week later, I found myself back at the tunnel. I don't know why I returned. Part of me told me to leave it alone forever, to bury it under wood and dirt and forget. But another part, something far darker, drove me to the grate, flashlight in hand. The cold, damp air hit me like a wall when I lifted it. I could see the dark curve inside, swallowing the light. And then I heard it. A low, rumbling exhale that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I crawled in. The tunnel seemed longer than I remembered. The air grew heavier with each inch, thicker, almost tangible, pressing against my lungs, filling my chest with icy fear. My flashlight flickered again, and for a moment I thought I saw movement in the corners of the beam, shapes that twisted in impossible angles. And then I heard it. A whisper, low, guttural, so close it felt like it came from inside my own head. You shouldn't be here. I froze, trembling. Rational thought clashed violently with instinct. I had to keep moving. I had to see. The tunnel curved sharply, and then there it was again. Eyes, larger this time, reflecting the beam of my flashlight, peering down from the black like the forest itself had become alive. The thing, or whatever it was, leaned closer, inhaling, its presence making the walls pulse with damp cold. I wanted to scream, to run, but my voice stuck, caught in my throat. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a chamber, one I had never imagined existed beneath the ranger station. The walls were slick with condensation, and the floor was covered with stones that gleamed like wet teeth. Shapes moved just beyond the edges of my flashlight's beam, tall, hulking forms with matted hair and limbs that bent impossibly. They didn't move toward me aggressively, but the air thrummed with their intent. They were aware, calculating, watching every twitch of muscle, every shallow breath I took. And then I saw it. The skeletal remains of animals, deer, elk, raccoons, stacked in neat piles against the walls. Their skulls glimmered in the weak light, empty eye sockets staring into the tunnel, accusing, warning. The smell hit me then. Iron, decay, something primal that made my stomach heave. And in that moment, I understood the truth I had tried to deny. This tunnel, this creature, whatever haunted it, was not just part of the forest. It was the forest's predator, its secret, something ancient and patient, waiting for intruders. Panic surged through me. I turned to leave, but the tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly behind me. The grate above was gone. I was trapped. My flashlight flickered violently, shadows dancing on the walls, twisting into faces that didn't exist. My breathing became ragged, shallow, as though the air itself was being stolen. I forced myself to crawl forward, hoping blindly for an exit, guided only by instinct and the faint memory of where I had come in. And then I felt it, a hot, wet breath against my neck, a weight pressing down from behind, like a shadow with mass, solid and alive. I scrambled forward, hands scraping against stone, knees cutting into wet gravel, until at last my fingers brushed wood. The grate was there, just a few feet away, impossible and real at the same time. With a last surge of adrenaline, I pushed, scrambled, and slammed it shut. I sat on the floor of the station, gasping, shaking, the sweat freezing on my skin. Outside, the fog hung heavy in the clearing, silent and expectant. I realized then that the tunnel had not let me leave easily because it hadn't intended for me to leave at all. I understood that whatever lived down there was not a simple animal, not a legend, but a force, ancient, intelligent, and patient. And it had been watching me, learning me, testing me. I tried to leave that night. I told myself I would transfer, find a new post, escape the station entirely. But I couldn't. The forest, the station, the tunnel, they were a part of me now, or I was a part of them. Every patrol I took after that, every hike, every clearing felt like trespassing. I would walk alone along ridges and feel eyes on me from every shadow, hear faint footsteps echoing my own, and smell that metallic tang in the air that I could never forget. Weeks turned into months. The sightings became less frequent, but the tension never left me. I began keeping logs of the tunnel, of the footprints, of the sounds. I noted the areas where wildlife avoided, where shadows lingered longer than they should. I learned patterns. When the fog thickened, when the wind blew from the north, when the silence stretched too long. The creature was patient, yes, but not careless. I had to understand it, or I would never survive another encounter. One evening, I was called to investigate a disappearance near the northern lake. A hiker had gone missing, leaving only footprints that vanished into a thick grove of spruce. I approached the site carefully, flashlight and radio ready. The forest was silent, unnervingly so, every sound swallowed as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. And then I saw it, a trail of footprints, enormous, human-shaped, with toes that curled unnaturally. They led not toward the lake, but toward the shadows of the cliffs, toward a tunnel I had never known existed. The fear returned with full force, colder, sharper. My pulse hammered in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run, to abandon my post, abandon my duty. But duty, stubbornness, or perhaps madness drove me forward. I crawled into the tunnel, flashlight cutting through the thick darkness, and the whispers returned. You cannot leave. You will not leave. This time, I felt the weight of 1,000 years in that dark stone corridor. I realized that the forest itself had eyes and teeth and patience, and I understood I was no longer merely a ranger protecting the forest. I was a part of its story, another shadow within its folds, another secret it would keep buried beneath stone, roots, and fog. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The forest outside seemed alive in a way I hadn't noticed before. Every branch a finger, every rustle a whisper, every shadow a thing that could move when I wasn't looking. I sat at the desk, flashlight on, radio static filling the silence, trying to piece together what I had seen in that tunnel. The hiker. Where was he? The footprints led to darkness, to stone walls beneath the earth. I could feel the pulse of something there, waiting, patient. By dawn, I forced myself to eat something, coffee and stale bread, my hands shaking. I went over the patrol logs, every map, every note. The missing hiker wasn't the first. There were records buried in dusty files of other disappearances, officially accidents lost in the forest, never found. But the notes hinted at something different, footprints that didn't match humans, strange sounds, reports dismissed as hallucinations or exaggeration. And now I understood. I was not imagining it. The forest hid its truth, and the tunnel was its heart. The days that followed were tense, haunted. Every footstep outside the station echoed in my mind. Every fog-shrouded clearing seemed to hide eyes. I patrolled cautiously, moving only when necessary, flashlight and radio always ready. But the forest had learned me too. It knew my patterns, my routines. One evening, as the sun bled orange through the trees, I noticed the footprints again, huge, human-shaped, impossibly long toes pressed into the soft soil of a clearing I had walked hundreds of times. They were fresh. I followed them, heart hammering, breath shallow. The forest closed in, branches scratching at my coat, fog curling around my boots like cold fingers. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to leave this place, to abandon my post. But I couldn't. The hiker's life, the forest itself, demanded it. The footprints led me to a slope covered in moss where the earth seemed darker, wetter, and beneath it, the entrance to another tunnel. Not the one under the station, but similar carved stone, slick with damp. I dropped to my knees and pressed my hand to the cool stone. The smell hit me immediately, metallic, earthy, a scent that twisted my stomach. The tunnel seemed to breathe beneath my palm. I knew that whatever waited inside had been watching me, shaping my steps, drawing me in. My mind screamed at me to leave, but I was already crawling in, flashlight trembling in my grip. The darkness swallowed me. My ears rang with the faint drip of water and the distant sound of movement, soft, deliberate, like claws dragging along stone. My heart thudded painfully, every beat echoing in the narrow tunnel. And then I saw it. Eyes. More than one this time, multiple, glowing faintly in the beam of my flashlight. The creatures were larger than before, taller, more hunched, moving in ways that defied human anatomy. They didn't charge, they didn't even approach directly. They waited, circling, pressing the air with their presence. I tried to reason. Maybe this was some old predator's den, some human research gone wrong, an escaped animal bred for size. But nothing rational could explain the way the eyes followed me, the way the air itself seemed to pulse with intent, the way the stone walls seemed alive, closing in. My mind began to fracture under the pressure. Every thought of escape, every rational plan, fell apart under the weight of pure primal fear. A sound cut through the darkness, the hiker's voice, faint, almost human, calling for help. I froze, straining to listen. The sound was real, unmistakable, but it wasn't coming from the same place twice. The voice echoed off walls that shouldn't exist, moving as if carried by the tunnel itself. And then, the exhale, a low, rumbling breath behind me. The creature. It had returned. Panic surged. I scrambled forward blindly, hands scraping against stone, knees cutting into wet gravel. My flashlight flickered violently, shadows dancing on the walls, forming grotesque faces that weren't there. The voice came again, closer, pleading. I reached the end of the corridor, or at least what I thought was the end. A chamber opened, larger than I could have imagined, slick with condensation and littered with the skeletal remains of animals like before. But this time, the hiker was there, or at least part of him. He wasn't moving, or at least not in a normal way. His eyes were wide, reflecting the dim light, frozen in terror. His mouth opened slightly as if whispering something, and then I heard it. The exhale again, louder this time, shaking the stone walls, a presence so immense it made my chest ache. The creatures moved around us, circling, deliberate, patient. I wanted to flee, to grab the hiker, to scream, but my body refused. Fear had paralyzed me, and then I realized the hiker wasn't alive in any ordinary sense. He was a shadow, a memory, a warning etched into the stone by the forest itself. The creatures weren't hunting for prey. They were teaching, testing, reminding me of my place. I had wandered too far into the heart of the forest, and the forest had pulled me in like a tide, showing me that some things weren't meant to be understood, only survived. I crawled backward, hands slick on the stone floor, dragging myself toward the tunnel's entrance. Every sound was amplified, every shadow twisted, every heartbeat a drum of impending doom. My flashlight fell, illuminating the massive forms hunched around the chamber. They didn't move toward me aggressively, but the pressure was enough. It was enough to know I could not linger. I had to leave. I emerged from the tunnel hours later, the fog heavy, my boots soaked, my clothes torn. The ranger station loomed ahead, familiar yet alien in the dim light. I collapsed against the door, shaking, gasping, my hands raw from the climb. The forest outside was silent again, calm, almost indifferent. I realized then that it was always waiting, patient, testing the boundaries of those who dared enter its heart. And I had tested mine. I never spoke of the tunnel to anyone. I documented the disappearances carefully, always noting the unusual details. But I left out the eyes, the exhale, the skeletal remains. No one would believe me. They didn't need to. The forest keeps its secrets, and the forest demands silence from those who survive its lessons. Even now, years later, I patrol the forest with a new understanding. Every clearing is suspicious, every shadow holds potential truth, every fog-shrouded ridge a doorway to the unknown. I know that the tunnel is there, beneath the ranger station, beneath the stones and roots and earth. I know it waits. And I know that one day, if I push too far, if I let curiosity outweigh caution, it will call to me again. But in that knowledge, there is a strange solace. The forest is alive, yes, and fear is its currency. But fear teaches. Fear sharpens the senses, illuminates the unseen, and forces you to respect what you cannot conquer. I have learned to walk its trails with vigilance, patience, and reverence. I know the danger. I know the darkness, and I know the tunnel will always be there, a reminder that the forest holds power beyond understanding, that some secrets are meant to stay buried, and that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving through it when every instinct screams to stop. Sometimes when the wind moves just right, I hear it. The low exhale beneath the ranger station, the rustle of claws over stone, the whisper of something waiting. I take a deep breath, tighten my boots, and remind myself, I am a ranger, and the forest is my charge. But I do so with respect, with humility, and with the understanding that the forest will always have the final say. The forest had changed me. I could feel it in every step along the ridge lines, in every creak of the station's floorboards, in the way the wind whispered through the pines. Fear was no longer just a visitor. It was a companion, a teacher, and sometimes a warning. Yet I could not let it control me completely. I was still a ranger, bound to the forest, to its trails and hidden valleys, to the people who wandered within its depths, unaware of the silent, watchful eyes. One late evening, as the sun dipped below the western ridges and the fog began its slow crawl through the clearing, I returned to the tunnel. Not to confront, not to challenge, but to understand. I carried a notebook, a camera, and enough courage to crawl where reason screamed, I shouldn't. The grate creaked as I lifted it, the familiar metallic scent of damp stone filling my nostrils. I peered into the darkness, flashlight trembling in my hand. The air was colder than usual, heavier, thick with the weight of unseen eyes. I crawled in slowly, each movement deliberate. I had learned to move quietly, to breathe with the rhythm of the tunnel, to respect its presence. The shadows seemed to shift around me, deeper now, almost alive, as though the tunnel itself was aware of my intent. I paused at the curve where I had first seen the eyes, heart hammering, listening. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence, as if the forest had held its breath for me alone. Then I saw them. The shapes hunched against the stone walls larger than before, their eyes reflecting the weak beam of my flashlight like pools of molten gold. They did not advance, but they did not retreat. They watched, and I realized with a mix of terror and awe that they were not merely creatures. They were keepers, guardians of the forest's deepest secrets, and I was intruding into something far older than human understanding. I reached the chamber at the end of the tunnel. The piles of skeletal remains glistened with condensation, and the smell of iron and decay pressed against me like a physical force. But this time, I was not paralyzed. I moved deliberately, notebook and camera in hand, documenting the evidence, recording what no one would believe, knowing that even if I survived, the forest might erase it all from memory if it wished. The air thrummed with a quiet energy, the low exhale I had come to fear now a constant, almost hypnotic presence. I paused, my flashlight sweeping across the chamber, and there it was again, the missing hiker. Only now he was more shadow than flesh, his eyes empty but aware. I realized then that the forest does not take life indiscriminately. It preserves essence, memory, fear. It teaches lessons, tests courage, demands respect. I did not reach for him. I did not speak. I merely watched, heart pounding, understanding that survival here required more than strength. It required humility. The creatures moved closer, a deliberate, silent circle around me. My instincts screamed to run, to claw my way back to the sunlight, but I held still, flashlight steady, breathing in the rhythm of the tunnel. And then I understood. This was the forest's test, the culmination of all the fear, all the encounters, all the nights spent listening to rustling shadows and exhalations in the dark. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it, facing the unknown and respecting it. Hours or perhaps minutes passed. Time in the tunnel was no longer linear. The creatures, the skeletal remains, the whispering air, all of it became a rhythm, a pulse I could follow. I emerged finally, crawling back toward the grate. The fog outside was thicker now, curling through the clearing like smoke. I climbed out, heart still hammering, lungs burning, but with a strange sense of peace. The forest had tested me, shown me its power, and I had survived, not unscathed, but awake, aware, and changed. From that night onward, my patrols were different. I moved with intention, every footstep measured, every sound noted. I no longer feared the forest. I respected it. I spoke less of the tunnel, though I documented it meticulously, aware that one day someone else might stumble upon it, might test its patience, might face the creatures in the dark. And I knew the forest would judge them as it judged me, with silent, deliberate attention. Sometimes, when the wind blows just right through the clearing, I can hear it. The low, rumbling exhale beneath the station. The shadows shift in ways they should not. And I remember the hiker, the creatures, the lessons of the tunnel. Fear has not left me. It is not gone. But it has become a teacher, a guide, a reminder that courage is forged in the dark, in places no one else will see, in the silence beneath the forest floor where the forest keeps its secrets. I have come to understand something vital. The wilderness is not just a collection of trees, streams, and wildlife. It is a living entity, patient, aware, holding memories and lessons far older than humans can comprehend. The tunnel beneath the station, the creatures that inhabit it, the shadows and whispers, they are part of the forest's memory, part of its history, and part of its will. And I am part of it now, a guardian of its secrets, a witness to its lessons forever changed. I walk the ridges and valleys differently now. I listen with intent. I move deliberately. Every clearing, every fog-shrouded path, every shadow is a teacher, a reminder that respect is survival, that courage is endurance, and that the unknown is never empty. It waits quietly, patiently for those who dare to wander too far. The forest has not let me go. I do not wish to leave. Its lessons are harsh, its truths uncomfortable, but they are real. And in that reality, I have found purpose: to watch, to learn, to respect, and to endure. The tunnel beneath the ranger station is not just a place of fear. It is a crucible, a mirror, a reminder that the wilderness holds power far beyond human understanding, and that those who walk its paths must do so with eyes open, heart steady, and mind prepared. And so I walk, always forward, always alert, always aware that the forest is alive, and that beneath the station, in the cold, damp stone, the tunnel waits. The creatures wait. And if I falter, if I forget my lessons, the forest will remind me. But until that day comes, I remain a ranger, a witness, a guardian of secrets buried beneath roots, stone, and fog. I have survived. I endure. And the forest, in its infinite patience, watches, waiting, teaching, reminding me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. I never thought fear could live in a place I'd called home for years. My name is, well, it doesn't matter. I've been a forest ranger in the northern reaches of Montana for over a decade, walking trails that twist through dense pine and spruce, tracing streams so cold they bite through gloves, and patrolling areas that most people only glimpse from the windows of their cars. I thought I knew the forests, every shadow, every rustle, every scent. I thought the wilderness was predictable, if harsh. I was wrong, terribly wrong. It started in the middle of a dry October, when the sun dips behind the ridges early, leaving the valleys under a permanent, bruised twilight. I just finished a late shift, hiking a boundary line along the ridge above our ranger station. The air smelled like wet leaves and pine sap, sharp, almost medicinal, and a light fog pressed down, curling around the trunks like ghostly fingers. I was tired, but I liked the silence that came with the fall. The wildlife slows down in October, and you can hear the forest breathing. When I returned to the station, a small, squat building of weathered timber at the edge of a clearing, I noticed something I hadn't before. The air smelled wrong, like burnt hair and iron, but faintly, almost sweetly. My stomach tightened. I chalked it up to the old wiring in the building. The heater had a habit of sending odd smells into the cabin when it kicked on. I dropped my pack and flicked on the lights. Everything looked normal. The office was quiet, still. But then I noticed it. The floor grate near the back corner, the one I'd never paid much attention to, was slightly shifted. I knelt and pressed on it. It moved more than I expected. Cold air seeped up from below, carrying a damp, earthy scent that made my stomach churn. I froze, thinking maybe a critter had dug underneath. But there was something about it, deliberate, almost inviting. My rational mind screamed, it's just an old building. There are old maintenance tunnels beneath most ranger stations, but a part of me recoiled, instinct tightening like a fist around my ribs. I pressed my ear to the floor. At first there was nothing, then a sound, a faint scuffling like claws across stone. My heart caught in my throat. I pulled back. No animals in Montana make that noise, at least not in the dead of night when the station is silent. I wanted to leave it, ignore it, call it imagination. But curiosity, dangerous curiosity, won. I grabbed a flashlight from the desk drawer and knelt again. The tunnel was smaller than I expected, just wide enough to squeeze through. The air that pressed out smelled musty, decayed, almost metallic. I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to go down there, but I couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when something was down there. I slid the grate fully open and aimed my flashlight into the black. The beam cut through the darkness to reveal stone walls, damp and slick. The tunnel curved sharply, disappearing into a shadow that seemed to breathe. I shivered and forced my shoulders down to squeeze in. The air was cold, damp, and the smell intensified. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Somewhere in the dark, I thought I heard it, a low exhale, almost human, almost animal, but neither. I swallowed hard. The rational part of my mind ran through possibilities, a trapped animal, a homeless person, some old ventilation shaft. But the deeper I crawled, the more the darkness seemed alive, pressing in against my skin, whispering with the rustle of something unseen. My fingers grazed the stone walls, slick with moisture. A thought struck me. Tunnels are designed to trap, to confuse. I was halfway in when I saw movement. A shadow shifted at the far curve impossibly fast. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I froze. "Hello?" I croaked. No answer, only silence. The air itself felt thicker now, as if the tunnel had grown narrower, the ceiling lowering, suffocating. My flashlight flickered once, twice. I shook it, then I saw the eyes. Not human, too large, too luminescent, reflecting the beam like twin lanterns in the dark. I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe shock, maybe a fatal arrogance, but I stared back. The thing stepped forward, hulking, broad-shouldered, covered in matted hair that glistened with the tunnel's moisture. It made no sound, no growl, nothing, yet I felt the weight of a predator's focus, heavy and inescapable. I remember thinking, this is a creature no one believes in, a forest legend, a story whispered among rangers to scare rookies. And yet, there it was. My skin crawled as it tilted its head, eyes locking with mine, intelligent and ancient. My mind screamed at me to retreat, but my legs felt rooted to the stone floor. Then it moved. A step closer, and the tunnel seemed to exhale. The smell hit me fully now, rotting earth, blood, something wild. I stumbled backward, tripping over uneven stone. My flashlight clattered to the ground and rolled out of reach, illuminating the creature's legs, long and bent at odd angles, hair dark and dripping. My heart pounded in my ears. I scrambled to my feet, lunging back toward the entrance. The tunnel seemed endless. I don't know how I made it out, only that I clawed my way through the muck and darkness until the grate loomed above me. My hands shook as I pushed it closed, slamming it into place. I leaned against it, chest heaving, eyes watering. Outside, the station was quiet, the fog curling through the clearing. Everything looked normal. Nothing had changed. Nothing ever would, except me. I told no one that night. I cleaned my gear, poured coffee, and sat by the heater, shaking. My rational mind demanded an explanation. Anything. Earthquake, animal, a vivid hallucination from fatigue. But I couldn't shake the eyes. They burned into my memory, luminous and knowing, like it had been waiting. And I realized something else, a truth I didn't want to admit. I wasn't sure the tunnel wanted me to leave. Days passed, and I tried to return to routine. I patrolled the ridges, checked the streams, cataloged wildlife. But the tunnel haunted me. Every sound became suspicion, every shadow a threat. Footsteps on the porch made my stomach clench. Sometimes, late at night, I thought I saw movement beneath the floorboards of the station itself, small glimpses, a flash of fur or bone. And I knew. It hadn't left. It was waiting. Always waiting. The next encounter came weeks later. I was making a routine check of a remote campsite along the edge of the national forest. The area was empty, stripped of visitors by the early cold. Fallen leaves swirled in the wind. My radio crackled with static, nothing else. That's when I heard the sound, knocking. 3 distinct knocks, then a pause, then 3 more. They came from the fire pit, from the metal grate over the ground. Not a person's rhythm, but precise, deliberate. I froze, blood cold. I approached cautiously, flashlight cutting swaths through the fog. The grate was secure, locked as always. No one was there. The knocking stopped the moment I reached it. My skin crawled, a shiver moving up my spine. I knew, even without seeing it, that whatever haunted the ranger station had found me here, or at least was aware. Night fell fast. I stayed until dark, patrolling, flashlight in hand, each step a calculation. My mind raced with possibilities. Another ranger, playing a prank, wildlife, hallucination. But rationality faltered the moment I noticed footprints, large, humanoid, but with toes too long, nails sharp, pressed into the soft earth around the fire pit. My stomach turned. They weren't human. I left that night shaken, but the forest didn't let me go. The whispers returned with the wind, the brush rustled with intent, and shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. I began to dream of the tunnel, the creature waiting, its eyes glowing in the black. In my dreams, I would crawl through its passages, chase through endless corridors until I awoke, gasping, drenched in sweat, the heater rattling in the dead of night. It was during one of these nights, weeks later, that I finally realized the depth of the forest's hold on me. A call came over the radio, a hiker missing near the northern ridge. I grabbed my pack, radio in hand, flashlight ready. The forest was alive, more oppressive than usual, branches clawing at my coat, fog pressing cold against my cheeks. As I searched, I noticed something impossible. Every time I rounded a bend, I ended up back where I started. Paths I had walked hundreds of times now looped like a maze designed to trap. And then I saw them. Eyes, luminous and intent, watching from the tree line, reflecting moonlight. The creature, or perhaps another, moved silently, shadow to shadow, always just out of reach. I called into the forest, my voice cracking, but no answer came, only the rustle of leaves and the distant crack of a branch. Fear burned through me, sharper than anything I'd felt before. I don't know how long I walked, how long I ran. The forest blurred, my mind fractured. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. The wilderness isn't just a home for the living. It's a cathedral for the unknown, the hidden, and those who think they understand it are merely visitors. I was a visitor, and I had wandered too far into its heart. I finally made it back to the station long after midnight, the fog thick and heavy, a cloak that hid the familiar from me. Every shadow seemed elongated, warped by the dim light of my flashlight. I stumbled over roots and fallen branches as if the forest itself was rearranging its floor just to trip me. My lungs burned, my hands were raw from gripping the flashlight, and my mind refused to stop replaying the eyes that followed me, intelligent, patient, unyielding. I knew they hadn't blinked once. Inside the station, the familiar smells of pine cleaner and old wood offered little comfort. I collapsed at the desk, radio static still buzzing in my ears, heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped animal. I wanted to call for backup, to bring in another ranger, but something inside me, pride, stubbornness, or sheer terror, kept me from it. The tunnel had taught me a lesson. Some things weren't meant to be shared. If anyone else saw it, they would never look at the forest the same way again. I couldn't bear to burden anyone with what I had seen. I still remember the first time I saw the door, not in the sense that I stumbled upon it by chance. No, it felt more like the door had been waiting for me, as if it already knew I'd be the one to find it. Most rangers will tell you that the forest feels alive, but that's just poetic talk. Trees don't think, stones don't whisper, rivers don't remember. At least that's what I used to believe. My name doesn't matter anymore, but for the record, I've worn this uniform for 17 years. Most of that time has been spent in the Northern Rockies, assigned to a district of about 300 square miles of dense backcountry, mostly untrailed terrain, old fire roads, forgotten survey markers, and more ghost stories than you can count. We used to joke that our radios carried more missing person reports than static. I took pride in knowing every inch of that place. Pride and a little bit of guilt. Because one of those disappearances, that's on me. 2 years ago, a volunteer named Blake went missing under my supervision. We were tracking bear movements before the early thaw. He was 23, too eager, not enough sense of the quiet. It only takes one mistake in those woods. I told him to stay within earshot while I scouted the ridge. He didn't. When I came back down, the prints stopped in a patch of melted snow. No struggle, no drag marks, just gone. The search went on for weeks. I never found a single trace, but every time I'm alone out there, I swear I hear his radio crackle through the static, just a single word, or maybe my own name. By the time spring rolled around this year, the district had shifted personnel again. New supervisors, new protocols, same ghosts. I'd been camping near the old fire line, Station 7, an outpost we mothballed years ago after the water table flooded the basement. The place had a smell that didn't fade, wet metal, mildew, and something faintly like burnt hair. But I liked it. It kept people away. That morning, I woke before dawn to the sound of someone walking outside my tent, crunching, slow, deliberate. I unzipped the flap, expecting to see deer. Nothing. The prints in the frost were bare human feet, small, maybe a woman's, leading into the trees. It should have been my first warning to radio it in. But out here, logic is a reflex. People wander. Locals take shortcuts through the property. Survivalists move quietly. So I followed. The trail wound between spruce and deadfall until I reached an area I didn't recognize. Odd, given how long I'd worked this region. The trees grew denser, older, trunks fused by lichen so thick they looked like the skin of something sleeping. The air smelled sterile, somehow, like the absence of decay. About a mile in, the footprints stopped. They ended in a clearing no larger than my living room. The ground dipped slightly, forming a hollow, and at the center was a door set directly into the earth. Steel. Rusted, but intact. No handle, no lock, just a seam. You could miss it unless you were standing right over it. My first thought was bunker. Cold War era, maybe some sealed storage facility. But there were no ventilation pipes, no concrete perimeter, nothing that suggested construction. Just a door in the soil, and for fresh prints leading to it, then stopping dead in front of it. I knelt down and pressed my hand against the metal. It was warm. I remember standing there for a long time listening. Nothing but the forest's slow breathing. And then, faintly like a vibration under the ground, 3 knocks. Deliberate, muffled, but close. I jerked my hand back. The air shifted, and for a second I thought I smelled smoke, though there was no wind. That was enough for me. I marked the coordinates on my GPS and started back toward camp. But the forest felt rearranged, like the trail had moved while I was looking away. By the time I reached Station 7 again, the frost was gone, and the footprints too. I tried to log the anomaly in my report, but my pen kept shaking, and I ended up deleting the note. There are things you learn not to put in writing when you've been in this job long enough. That night, I woke to the radio turning itself on. Static first, then a burst of words. Don't open it. The voice, low, distorted, sounded like it came from deep water. I tore the battery out. My pulse wouldn't slow down. I couldn't stop thinking about those bare footprints and the knocks beneath the soil. The next day, I hiked back with my supervisor, Carla. She didn't like stories. She liked data. We found nothing. No footprints, no hollow, no door. Even the topography seemed different. She told me maybe I'd misread the coordinates or stumbled into an old mine shaft half buried by runoff. The forest eats its mistakes, she said, half joking, but she looked uneasy. When we got back, she asked me quietly if I'd been getting enough sleep lately. I lied. Weeks passed. Reports started piling up. Unexplained noises at night near the western boundary. A wildlife camera capturing a figure standing motionless for 6 hours straight. Hikers finding campsites that looked freshly abandoned, food still warm in pots. And then there was the smell, strong, chemical, almost like sulfur, coming from the creek that fed into the reservoir. Every ranger on duty mentioned it, but no one wanted to trace it upstream. When I volunteered, Carla just stared at me long and hard before nodding. "Don't go alone," she said. I didn't listen. The further I followed the creek, the quieter it got. Even the water seemed to hush itself. The smell thickened until it coated my tongue. Then I saw it again. Not the same clearing, but the same kind of hollow, the same impossible geometry to the land, like the earth had caved in and healed around something. I knew what I'd find before I saw it. Another door. This one slightly open. It gaped maybe an inch, enough to breathe. The warmth rolled out in a single exhale. I crouched and shined my flashlight into the gap. The beam didn't reach an end. Just blackness, swallowing light whole. But there was something else, a reflection, metallic, wet, moving just beyond the threshold. It pulsed once like a lung. Then the light died. My radio hissed, static, and underneath it faintly, a voice whispering my name. Not from the speaker, from behind me. I turned fast. The forest was still, but in the mud near the water's edge were footprints again. Bare, human, pointing toward the open door. Fresh. I could see droplets of creek water still filling the impressions. I backed away, shaking, half running through the brush until my lungs burned. When I looked back, I swear I saw the door closing on its own. No sound. Just the shimmer of heat rising from the metal as it sealed shut. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I blinked, I saw that darkness behind the seam. And somewhere in it, a face, Blake's face, mouthing something I couldn't hear. The next morning, when I checked the creek, the smell was gone. But in my cabin, muddy footprints led from the doorway to my bed. And the worst part, they matched my boots. Exactly. I didn't report the footprints. I couldn't. Not because I was afraid of what Carla would say, but because I wasn't sure what I'd be reporting anymore. The mud matched the same red soil from the creek, the same composition, same mineral smell, but I hadn't been near that water since the day before. My boots were clean. I checked 3 times, even wiped them with alcohol swabs. The prints were too perfect, heel to toe, the same stride as mine. Like something had studied the way I moved and recreated it exactly. I slept in the truck that night. The air inside felt safer somehow, enclosed, familiar. I kept the radio off, windows up, doors locked. Around 2 a.m, something knocked once, twice, softly on the driver's side window. I didn't look right away. I knew the sound of branches, of acorns falling, of raccoons scratching through packs. This wasn't that. This was Knuckles. Human. Slow, polite almost, like whoever or whatever was outside was waiting for me to open up. After a few minutes, it stopped. I must have fallen asleep with my hand still gripping the flashlight because when I woke, the sun was already rising. The driver's window was smeared with handprints, muddy, small, maybe a woman's, like before. Only there were too many fingers, 6, maybe 7 on each. I left Station 7 that morning. Told dispatch I needed to survey the northern boundary line. Truth was, I just needed distance. The further I drove, the quieter the forest got. Static faded from the radio. The air felt normal again. But every mirror reflection caught something wrong, a flicker, like a face behind mine. At noon, I pulled over near the old ranger cabin up by Lake Weatherton. The place hadn't been used in decades. Roof sagging, windows boarded, the kind of sight you only find if you already know where to look. I broke the lock, stepped inside. Dust thick enough to taste. The smell, wet wood and something faintly metallic like rusted blood. But it was dry. No leaks. No animals. In the corner, a filing cabinet leaned open, half collapsed from moisture. Inside were yellowed incident report, typed, dated, signed by names I didn't recognize. Each file was marked closed, internal, missing personnel, unauthorized excavations, unexplained heat signatures beneath the soil. I flipped through one and stopped cold at the coordinates printed near the bottom. The same coordinates I'd logged for the first door, same digits, same sequence. Only this file was dated 1978. The last page was a photograph. Grainy, but clear enough. A group of men in ranger uniforms standing around a dark opening in the earth. The steel door behind them, open, and behind that door, a shape, blurred from motion, like something leaning toward the light. I dropped the photo. My breath fogged in the cabin, even though it was nearly 70 degrees outside. When I picked it up again, the photo had changed. The men were gone. The door was closed, but in the reflection of the camera's flash, there was a face. Half mine, half something else. I burned the report in the stove, watched the paper curl and blacken until the room filled with that same sulfur smell from the creek. I stepped outside, gasping, my eyes watering, but the air didn't help. The smell was coming from the ground now, warm, rising through the soil. I drove back toward Station 7 that night, against every instinct screaming at me not to. Halfway there, my headlights picked up something moving through the trees, tall, pale, wrong in its rhythm. It didn't turn when I passed. It just stood, its head tilting slightly, tracking me with a movement too smooth to be human. When I stopped at the gate to unlock it, I looked back. The figure was gone. Inside my cabin, the footprints were back. Same place. Only this time, they weren't just leading to the bed. They led to the wall opposite it and stopped. I ran my hand along the logs until I found a draft. The seams didn't match. One section of wall was newer, bolted from the inside. I pried it loose. Behind it was another door, smaller than the others, metal, seamless. No hinges, no handle, just a faint outline in the wood. When I leaned close, the surface trembled, like something on the other side was breathing slow and steady in rhythm with my own. I reached out stupidly and touched it. It was warm again. The warmth traveled up my arm, pulsing in sync with my heartbeat. I felt dizzy, lightheaded, like my blood had changed direction. And then I heard it, a voice, not from the radio, not from outside, from behind that door. Blake. My name didn't come next, just his. But it was my voice saying it. I stumbled back, hit the floor, my hand numb. The breathing behind the door stopped. The silence pressed in so hard it felt like the air had weight. I packed my gear that night, drove to the ranger station 40 miles east. Carla wasn't there. No one was. The office was dark, half the desks empty, the rest covered in plastic like they'd been abandoned mid-renovation. A note was taped to the front desk, typed unsigned, Area 7 operations suspended, contact prohibited. The rest was redacted. I slept in the truck again, parked outside the closed gate until the sound of footsteps woke me just before dawn. Bare feet on gravel. Soft. Careful. I didn't move, didn't breathe. They circled the truck once, then again. When I finally built up the courage to glance out the side mirror, I saw them. Footprints forming in real time, one after another, pressing into the dirt with nothing visible making them. The air around them shimmered like heat. I started the engine, floored it down the access road, didn't look back. Somewhere between mile marker 14 and 15, the radio clicked on by itself, static, then a voice. Calm. My own voice. It's open now. I threw the radio out the window, but I could still hear it, faint, underneath the growl of the tires, as if it wasn't coming from the truck anymore. It was coming from inside my head. And when I looked down, my hands on the wheel weren't mine anymore. They were wet, streaked with mud. The same red soil from the creek, the same pattern as the prints on my floor. I don't remember the next 10 miles. When I came to, the truck was parked in front of Station 7 again. The gate open, the frost returned. And there, in the clearing, where the ground still steamed, the door stood wide this time, open all the way. A set of fresh footprints led inside. My own. The air around the door felt wrong. Too still, too dense, like the forest itself was holding its breath. I should have run. Every rational instinct I had left screamed at me to get back in the truck, to drive until the trees turned to desert. But there's something about fear that makes you want to see. Not because you're brave, but because some part of your brain refuses to believe what your body already knows. I stepped closer. The footprints disappeared into the darkness below. They sank into soft soil, then nothing. I knelt at the edge of the threshold, shined my flashlight into the hole. It caught the edge of a metal staircase descending straight down, spiral, narrow, wet with condensation. The beam seemed to dissolve after 20 feet, swallowed by black. I should have tested the ground, radioed it in, anything. Instead, I placed one boot on the first step. The sound echoed like it was striking an empty cathedral beneath the forest floor. The temperature dropped the moment I crossed the threshold. The air tasted like copper and ash. I counted my steps as I descended, 20, 30, 50. But the distance didn't make sense. The staircase kept curving, endless, and yet I hadn't traveled more than a few yards below the surface. The geometry of it didn't belong in the world I knew. My light flickered once, twice, then steadied again. At the base, the stairs opened into a corridor carved from rock. The walls were smooth, almost polished, as if something had melted its way through. Puddles of water reflected my light in trembling patches. The smell hit next. Wet fur and something decaying, old and deep. My radio crackled faintly in my pack, even though I'd removed the batteries. A door waited at the end of the corridor. Smaller, human-sized, painted white once, but now the color of bone. I pressed my ear against it, faint breathing. Slow, rhythmic. I pushed the handle. It opened silently, too easily. The room beyond looked like a research chamber, or what was left of one. Rusted lab tables, shelves collapsed under the weight of glass containers. A single bulb hung from a cable in the ceiling, swinging slightly as if it had been touched moments before. My flashlight caught a reflection on the far wall. A mirror, cracked down the middle. In the mirror's reflection, I wasn't alone. A figure stood behind me, pale, tall, thin as wire. I spun around. Nothing. But when I looked back, it was closer in the reflection, its face pressed just over my shoulder, expressionless. Its mouth hung open as though it were mimicking my breathing. The light flickered, and the figure in the mirror tilted its head like it was listening. I stepped backward until my spine hit cold metal. The mirror trembled. My reflection blinked, but I didn't. The reflection smiled, small and wrong. My jaw locked. The room went silent except for the steady dripping from somewhere in the dark. Something moved behind the walls. Slow, heavy, dragging. A vibration traveled up through the floor. The ceiling bulb swung harder now, shadows spinning like a carousel. And then the whisper. It came from the reflection. You were supposed to stay above. I stumbled forward, the mirror cracking wider as the sound deepened. The reflection didn't follow my motion this time. It stood still, smiling. Behind it, in the reflection's world, the corridor wasn't empty anymore. Shapes lined the walls, figures standing upright, their faces obscured by darkness. I reached for my sidearm, hands shaking so violently I could barely unclip the holster. The radio in my pack hissed to life, my own voice again. Calm. Detached. You opened it. You shouldn't have opened it. I fired once at the mirror. The glass shattered, spraying the floor. The sound rang endlessly, bouncing down the corridor like a scream trying to find a mouth. I backed toward the door, but the frame had shifted. The handle was gone, just smooth metal. Then the breathing stopped, all at once. The silence afterward was suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in the chamber, fast and irregular. Something touched my shoulder. Not a hand, a pressure like the air itself had weight. Cold, invisible. I turned, but there was nothing there. The puddle at my feet rippled, disturbed by something unseen. From behind me, in the shards of broken mirror on the floor, I saw the reflection of the figure again. Crawling this time. Too many joints. Too quiet. I ran. The corridor stretched longer than before. Each turn led into another, like the bunker was rearranging itself while I moved. My light flickered in pulses now, catching glimpses of walls that breathed in and out. At one point, I passed a doorway and saw my own silhouette standing inside, motionless, watching me run. Eventually, I reached the staircase again. But it wasn't metal anymore. It was wood. Old, rotted, the kind you'd find in an abandoned mine shaft. I climbed fast, but the steps groaned beneath my weight, bending like wet cardboard. The air grew thicker, hotter, every breath burning my throat. I burst through the opening and fell onto forest soil. The door behind me slammed shut with a hollow boom that echoed through the trees. Steam rose from its edges, glowing faintly in the dark like embers under ash. I crawled away on hands and knees until I reached the tree line. My lungs ached. My flashlight was dead. But above me the stars looked wrong, shifted, scattered, as though the sky itself had been rearranged. The forest was silent. Not the usual quiet of night, but absolute absence. No wind, no insects, no life. And somewhere behind me, from beneath the earth, came a sound I'll never forget. Knocking. Slow. Methodical. From the inside out. I turned toward the noise, trembling, and saw the door again, half buried now, as if the ground were swallowing it. The metal glowed faintly red, and there, pressed into the fresh soil before it, were more footprints. Bare. Human. But this time, they didn't lead to the door. They led away from it. Straight toward me. I stood frozen as the footprints advanced, forming one by one in the damp soil like something invisible was walking toward me. Each step sank deep, heavy, too deliberate to be random. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. The forest held me there, like the air had thickened into glass. When the last set of prints stopped just a few feet away, the air pressed against my chest, heavy, electric. The smell hit next. Wet fur, rust, and that faint sulfuric sting from the creek. I raised my light, but the beam died instantly. No flicker, no fade, just black. I could hear it breathing. Not a wild animal, not human either. There was rhythm, but no lungs behind it, like the forest itself had learned how to inhale. The sound moved around me, left, right, then directly behind. I felt the warmth on the back of my neck, and before I could react, something whispered close enough that I felt its breath slide across my skin. "You came back." The voice was my own. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots, clawing through the dirt. My flashlight rolled out of reach. The beam pulsed once more, weak, trembling, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something. My face, pale and wet, staring from the edge of the tree line. It smiled, but the eyes didn't blink. I ran. No thought, no direction, just pure survival. Branches tore at my arms, roots caught my boots, but I didn't stop until the sound of my own ragged breathing drowned everything else. When I finally slowed, I realized I was running toward the creek again. The smell of sulfur was gone, replaced by cold air and pine. For a moment, I convinced myself I'd escaped whatever that was. Then I saw the reflection. The water was unnaturally still, like a mirror stretched across the stream bed. My reflection stared up at me, but it wasn't copying me. Its chest rose and fell out of sync with my breath, and behind it faintly I could see the outline of the door, closed now, but glowing faintly beneath the water's surface, as if the earth had swallowed it whole. I backed away slowly. The reflection's mouth moved. No sound, just the shape of the words. I could almost read them. Let it in. The ground trembled. The reflection shattered as if the water itself had cracked like glass. A rush of cold wind blew through the trees, carrying the smell of rot and something ancient, like soil that had never seen daylight. I don't remember much after that. I think I blacked out. When I came to, I was lying on the floor of my cabin at Station 7. My clothes were dry, my boots clean. The lantern beside the bed still burned. For a few seconds, I convinced myself if it had been a nightmare brought on by exhaustion and guilt. But then I saw the wall. The hidden door, the one I'd pried open before, was gone. The boards had been replaced. Seamless. No bolts, no seams, no sign it had ever been disturbed. But the smell lingered. That sterile, burnt hair scent that doesn't belong anywhere in nature. I grabbed my field log, flipped to a clean page, and started writing everything down. The time, the coordinates, every sound, every image. My hands shook so badly the pen tore through the paper. By the time I finished, dawn had started to bleed through the window. I stood to close the blinds, and that's when I saw it. Outside the cabin, just beyond the tree line, someone was standing, barefoot, perfectly still, their head tilted slightly upward, like they were smelling the air. I couldn't make out the face at first, the light was too dim. But when the sun broke through the clouds, my stomach turned. It was me. Same uniform, same boots, same mud stains up the sleeves. My double turned its head toward me, slow, mechanical, like a puppet remembering it had a neck. Then it smiled, too wide, stretching the skin at the corners of its mouth until I thought it would split. I reached for my rifle, but my hands wouldn't move. The thing outside raised its hand in sync with mine, palm open, fingers trembling. I froze. We stood like that for what felt like hours, two of me, separated by a single pane of fogged glass. Then it lowered its hand, turned, and walked toward the tree line. Each step left deep, perfect prints in the frost. They didn't fade. I waited until nightfall before stepping outside. The air was colder than it should have been, and the forest was dead silent again. I followed the prints with my light. They wound through the trees, down the old access path, past the station's perimeter, and ended in front of the same clearing where I'd first found the door. But there was no door now, just bare ground, smooth and solid. The soil wasn't disturbed, no seams, no hollow sound when I stomped, just earth. Except, when I knelt and pressed my ear to the ground, I could hear it. Faint, distant, breathing. Slow, steady, deep beneath the surface. And every few seconds, something else. Knocking. I left the forest the next morning, drove straight through until the mountains disappeared in my rear view. When I turned in my badge, Carla wasn't there. No one was. The office was empty again, the phone's dead, the logbook's gone. Only one thing remained on my desk, my field log, open to the last page I'd written. In my handwriting below my final entry, there was one new line I didn't write. You're still below. The ink was still wet. That night, in the motel miles away from the forest, I woke to the sound of knocking on the wall behind the bed. 3 slow taps. Then silence. When I turned on the light, I saw muddy footprints on the carpet, starting at the door and ending beside the bed. Bare, human, still wet. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. I just sat there, the lamp humming beside me, staring at those prints like if I blinked, they'd crawl closer. They weren't random stains. Each one was perfect. Heel to toe, the weight pressed right where mine would fall. They formed a half circle around the bed, ending inches from my feet. The carpet was soaked beneath them. I reached down stupidly and touched the wet fibers. It wasn't just water. It was warm, sticky. When I raised my hand, the faint smell of rust hit me. I didn't need to look to know what it was. Blood. I don't know how long I sat like that, hand trembling, light flickering, until the sound came again. Not from the wall this time, from underneath the bed. A slow, hollow rhythm like something tapping from inside the floorboards. I leaned over the edge, every part of me begging not to, and shined the light into the gap. Nothing. Just dark and the faint shimmer of damp wood. I forced a laugh. Thin, broken, desperate to make it sound absurd. Maybe the pipes, maybe the building settling, maybe I'd brought something of the forest back with me in my head. But then the tapping changed. It wasn't random anymore. It was answering me. 3 knocks. Pause. Then 3 more. Exactly like the ones I'd heard beneath the ground. I backed away, heart pounding, and ran into the bathroom. Locked the door. My reflection stared back from the cracked mirror above the sink. Wild-eyed, filthy, older somehow. I splashed water on my face, told myself over and over that I was awake, that this wasn't a dream, that the forest was 100 miles away. Then I saw it. In the fogged mirror behind me, the reflection didn't move when I did. It just stood there, breathing slow, fogging the glass with each exhale. I wiped the steam away. The reflection smiled. My knees almost gave out. I staggered back, hit the sink hard enough to split my knuckles. The reflection tilted its head, watching me, that same faint amusement twitching at the corner of its mouth. Then it whispered, quiet, barely audible, but I heard it through the glass, not in my ears. You never left. The lights went out. I don't remember what happened next. When I came to, the bathroom door was open. The lamp was back on. The footprints were gone. Only the faint smell of sulfur remained. My field log sat open on the bed, a new line scrawled across the last page in my handwriting. Underneath is above now. That's when I stopped pretending I could explain any of this. I packed my things, drove through the night, and didn't stop until I hit the highway that cut through open desert. I slept in the truck with the windows down, the air dry and harmless. No trees, no doors, no reflections. But sleep didn't bring relief. I dreamed of the forest shifting like lungs, breathing in the clouds and exhaling mist, the sound of soil cracking open. I saw the doors, hundreds of them, rising out of the earth in perfect rows, steam bleeding from their edges, and above them silhouettes of people, barefoot, motionless, waiting. When I woke, the desert was quiet, too quiet. The air felt heavy again. My rearview mirror was fogged from the inside. I wiped it clean. There was someone sitting in the back seat. I turned, but no one was there. The seat was empty. Only the impression of weight lingered in the cushion. I looked back at the mirror. The figure was still there, just sitting, watching. My own face staring back at me from behind the glass. I floored the gas. The truck fishtailed across the sand, engine screaming. The mirror cracked from the vibration, and for an instant I saw something else in it. Not desert, not sky, but trees. Dark, endless, moving past as if the world itself had folded. The smell of pine, wet moss, and that metallic tang filled the cab. The radio flicked on. Static. Then a voice. Not mine this time. Blake's. "Help me. It's not closed." The transmission broke into a low hum, deep, almost mechanical, like something huge turning over beneath the earth. My teeth rattled from it. I slammed the radio off, pulled over, stumbled out into the dust, gasping for air. The world felt thinner. The horizon shimmered like heat, but the sun wasn't that strong. Then I noticed the ground. Footprints again, not just one set, dozens. Bare. Human, stretching across the desert toward the mountains I just left. And in the distance, faint against the orange light, a figure walked along them. Same uniform. Same stride. Me. I watched myself walk until the other me reached the horizon and didn't vanish, just blended into it like stepping behind a curtain. When I turned back toward the truck, the driver's door was open. The smell hit again. Sulfur. Something moved inside. Slow. Breathing. I reached for the handle, heart hammering, but froze when I saw what was written in the layer of dust across the hood. Letters traced by a single finger, deliberate and careful. Stop looking for the door. I wiped it away, climbed in, and drove until the gaslight came on. The desert gave way to scrubland, then to the edge of another forest, and as the first trees rose up in front of me, my stomach dropped. It was the same one. Station 7's district, the same ridgelines, the same valley, the same crooked pine at the turnoff. I killed the engine and sat there as the forest breathed out a slow, warm fog that rolled across the road, swallowing everything ahead. The radio crackled once more, faint but clear. "Come home." And behind the voice, beneath the static, I heard it again. Knocking. Slow, steady. From somewhere deep under the wheels. I froze, gripping the steering wheel so tight the veins in my wrists stood out. The knocking kept going. 3 slow thuds, then silence, then 3 more. Each one felt like it was echoing through the metal of the truck, up my legs, through my ribs. I told myself it was mechanical. Maybe the suspension settling after the long drive. Maybe a stone caught somewhere under the frame. But when I stepped out and crouched beside the truck, the knocking stopped. I circled around, flashlight cutting through the fog that had started to crawl up the road. The night air smelled wrong, not like pine or rain or soil, something burnt, chemical, sharp. I leaned down, brushed my hand over the dirt beneath the truck. Warm, vibrating, almost like a heartbeat. And then I realized the fog wasn't drifting from the trees. It was coming up through the ground. A fine hiss rose from the soil, like steam escaping from a pressure valve. The dirt shifted, tiny cracks forming between the pebbles. I stepped back fast. Something was breathing under the road. I climbed back into the truck and slammed the door shut. The fog was so thick now, the world outside was just a wall of white. I couldn't see the trees anymore. The headlights only lit a few feet ahead before fading into nothing. I turned the key. The engine groaned but didn't start. Tried again. Nothing but a dry click. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was shaking the cab. I hit the wheel once, twice. Then the radio came alive again on its own. Static at first, then a voice so low it sounded like it was right behind my ear. "You left it open." I spun around. The back seat was empty. I could see my own breath now, fogging in front of me. The air was freezing, the windows frosting over from the inside. Then from somewhere just outside the driver's door came a muffled scraping, like fingers dragging across metal. Long, slow, deliberate. The sound circled the truck once, twice. My flashlight was still on the passenger seat. I snatched it and aimed it toward the window. A handprint bloomed on the glass. Not from the outside, from inside. I lunged for the handle and flung the door open. The fog rolled in like a wave, swallowing the interior. The smell hit me again. Sulfur, rot, damp wood. I stumbled out, tripped over the gravel and landed hard. The forest was closer now. I swear it had been half a mile away when I stopped. But the tree line stood just beyond the truck's rear bumper. Dark and still, the trunks packed tight together like they'd been waiting. I should have run. I should have driven until the tires shredded. But something about that fog, it felt like it wanted me to move toward it. Like it was drawing me back in. And I did. I took one step, then another, until the beam of the flashlight caught the shape of something between the trees. It was a door. Standing upright in the dirt, frame cracked, hinges rusted, no wall around it. Just a door. Same color as the ones we'd found underground. My legs went weak. I fell to my knees. There was a faint humming sound, deep and rhythmic, pulsing from somewhere beyond it. The wood was shaking, dust falling from its top edge. I reached out, stupid, terrified, desperate to know, and touched the handle. Warm. Then the knocking started again, this time from the other side. 3 slow knocks. Pause. Then 3 more. The sound vibrated through my arm, through the ground beneath me. I pulled my hand back, stumbling away, but before I could turn, the latch clicked. The door creaked open just an inch, enough for the fog to pour through. I couldn't see what was beyond it, only the dark outline of a room, or maybe a tunnel, and the faint sound of water dripping. And then I saw something else, a set of footprints leading into that darkness. Mine. I backed up, shaking my head, whispering to myself to stop, to just get in the truck, drive anywhere but here. But my body didn't listen. My foot lifted on its own. I watched helpless as I stepped forward and crossed the threshold. The air changed instantly. Wet, heavy, stale. My flashlight flickered, sputtered, then steadied. I was standing in a tunnel of dirt and roots, just like the one beneath Station 7. The same smell, the same dripping, the same soft hum like breath through stone. And the door behind me was gone. I turned in circles, scanning the walls. The prints were ahead again, clear in the mud. I followed them. What else could I do? They led deeper and deeper until the tunnel widened into a chamber. In the center stood another door, taller, smoother, the wood pulsing faintly like something alive beneath the grain. This one didn't have a handle, just a single line carved into the surface. It opened itself. I stared at it for what felt like hours. The hum grew louder, resonating in my bones. And then a voice, Blake's voice, came from behind it, muffled but unmistakable. "Ranger," he whispered. "It's still moving." I pressed my hand against the door. The wood was warm, wet, beating in slow, steady rhythm. Then something pressed back. Not hard, just enough to let me know it was aware. I don't remember leaving the tunnel. I don't remember the door closing. I only remember waking up in my truck at dawn, parked in the same desert as before, engine running, fuel gauge empty. My hands were covered in mud, my boots soaked. In the distance where the forest should have been, there was only flat horizon. No trees, no fog, no sound. But when I looked at the rearview mirror, I saw the reflection of the forest behind me. And in it, through the mist, a door stood half open, waiting. I didn't report what happened that night. I told myself it was exhaustion, dehydration, maybe even a heat stroke. I deleted the audio logs I'd been recording, cleaned the mud off my clothes, and radioed the district office, saying I was taking 2 days off before rotation. They didn't question it. Rangers disappear into the wild sometimes, even when they don't go missing. But I couldn't stop thinking about the reflection, that impossible forest in the mirror. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that open door, the fog curling out of it like breath. By the 3rd night, sleep wasn't coming at all. I kept hearing that faint knocking, 3 slow hits against metal from somewhere inside the trailer I was staying in. Sometimes it came from the pipes, sometimes from under the floorboards, sometimes from the thin aluminum walls, as if someone was walking around outside, circling, tapping as they passed each corner. On the 4th morning, the phone rang. No one calls me out there. Cell service is garbage. But it buzzed and rang like it was right next to a tower. When I answered, I didn't say anything. Neither did the other person. Just static and a rhythmic hum, like breathing. Then underneath it, that same low voice from the night of the fog. "You left it open." The line went dead. I packed my gear and left within the hour. No call to the office this time. No radio check. Just a note on the desk, going back to close it. The road to the forest looked different in daylight. The asphalt had buckled in places, as if the ground had shifted underneath it. And further up the slope near the old mine entrance, I saw a new structure that hadn't been there before. A small shack made of corrugated steel with a federal seal on the side. No name, No signage, just a padlocked door and a faint generator hum inside. I stopped the truck and stepped out. The wind was still. No birds, no insects, just that steady hum. When I leaned close to the door, I heard something else beneath it. Voices. Not distinct words, just whispers, overlapping, fading in and out like a broken transmission. I backed away, but the moment I turned, I saw them, fresh footprints in the dirt, leading away from the shack toward the tree line. Same size as mine, same tread pattern. The air went cold. I followed them, not because I wanted to, but because something in me couldn't stand the idea of turning my back on them. They led to the tree line, into that same patch of forest I'd sworn wasn't there anymore. And the forest was back. Thick pine, motionless, the air heavy and damp. The ground felt soft, freshly disturbed. I could smell wet metal, like blood left out in the rain. The prince stopped at a clearing. In the center was a half-buried concrete slab, about 10 feet wide, covered in moss and leaves. A rusted handle stuck out from one edge. I brushed the debris away, revealing a hatch. The hum was louder now, vibrating through the soles of my boots. My flashlight flickered again. The moment I touched the handle, the knocking started. From underneath. 3 times. The same rhythm. I hesitated. Every part of me screamed to leave it shut. But the sound, it wasn't just noise this time. Between the knocks, I heard movement. Someone shifting, breathing, and then a voice. "Ranger," it said. "Please, it's dark down here." Blake's voice. I dropped to my knees. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep the beam steady. The voice was coming through solid steel, muffled but real. "Blake?" I whispered. Silence. Then quieter. "You left it open." I yanked the handle. It moved easily, too easily, like it had been waiting. The hatch groaned and lifted. A gust of stale, freezing air hit me in the face, smelling of rust, water, and something sweet, rotting beneath it. That below was a ladder descending into darkness. The hum came from down there. I pointed my light in and saw the tunnel, metal walls, dripping pipes, concrete floor slick with condensation. I lowered myself in, one rung at a time, until the hatch swung shut above me. The hum changed as soon as it closed. It wasn't mechanical anymore. It was rhythmic, almost like a slow heartbeat echoing through the metal. The deeper I went, the warmer it got. Sweat dripped into my eyes. The smell of sulfur thickened. At the bottom was a narrow corridor leading into blackness. The floor was covered in mud, and there, half smeared but still visible, were the same footprints. Mine. They led forward, past old signage so rusted the letters were unreadable, past pipes that hissed in and out like lungs, past doors that bulged slightly from pressure behind them. I followed the prince until the hallway opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling was lost in shadow. At the far end stood a massive metal door, smooth, seamless, except for a single vertical slit running down the center, and beside it a shape leaned against the wall. A ranger uniform, badged, faded, stained. Inside it was a man, head bowed, face hidden under his hat. His radio crackled faintly on his belt, whispering static. I took one step closer. The man lifted his head. It was me. He smiled, slow and wrong, and lifted a hand to the radio. The static cleared for just a moment, Smollett, and my own voice came through it, speaking words I hadn't said yet. "I'm still down here." The lights overhead began to flicker, one by one, like something moving through the circuitry, coming closer. The hum deepened until I could feel it in my teeth. The other me turned and pressed a hand against the great door. It responded like muscle under skin, flexing, pulsing. The slit began to widen. A smell rolled out. Wet soil, blood, something ancient. Behind the door, something moved. And in that sound, that endless breathing darkness, I finally understood what the forest had been hiding all along. It wasn't keeping anything out, it was keeping something in. The last light went out. And all I heard before the dark closed over me completely was the voice. So close it could have been inside my skull, whispering the same thing it had from the beginning. "You left it open." When I woke, I couldn't tell if I was still underground or somewhere else entirely. My flashlight was gone, my radio too. The air was damp and humming, as if the metal around me had a pulse. I tried to move, But the ground wasn't solid anymore. It gave slightly beneath me, like packed mud soaked through with water. There was no light source, but I could see, faintly. Everything glowed in a color that wasn't quite color, like the afterimage burned into your eyes after looking at a flame. Shapes shifted in the haze. For a moment, I thought they were tree trunks. Then I realized they were ribs. Massive, curved, half buried in the walls, covered in fungus and roots. Each breath of wind carried a sound, a whisper that wasn't quite words. I pushed myself to my feet and staggered forward. My boots made no noise on the floor. I couldn't tell if I was walking or being pulled. Somewhere ahead, water dripped rhythmically. I followed it until I reached another door, smaller, wooden, swollen from dampness. I reached for the handle, but before I could touch it, it began to open on its own. Behind it wasn't a room. It was an open space, like a cavern. In the center stood a single object, a wooden chair facing away from me. And on that chair sat someone wearing my jacket, my hat, my badge. I took a step closer. The figure didn't move. When I circled around, my chest locked tight. It wasn't me sitting there. It was Blake, or what was left of him. His eyes were open, pupils gone pale. His skin was stretched too tight, like it had been dried out from the inside. His lips moved, barely. "Ranger," he whispered. "You found it." I dropped to my knees beside him, shaking. His radio was still strapped to his shoulder, though it was crushed flat. I reached for it, but before I could touch it, Blake's hand clamped around my wrist. The grip was weak but wrong, like something inside him was moving his bones for him. "You opened it," he said, eyes rolling toward the ceiling. "Now it won't stop." I tried to pull free, but his fingers held fast. Something dark began to spread from under his collar, up his neck, across his jaw, thin black veins pulsing like worms. His breath smelled of wet earth. I fell backward, scrambling away. The ground shifted beneath me, rippling like a surface of water. And when I looked up, Blake was gone. The chair was empty. The door behind me had vanished. The chamber began to tighten, walls closing in, breathing, the air growing thick. A low vibration shook through everything. I pressed my palms against the surface nearest to me and felt it shudder in response. It wasn't metal. It was tissue, warm, alive. A voice murmured just behind my ear, "Keep walking." I spun around. No one. Just the sound of dripping and that endless heartbeat. I ran then. No direction, no plan. The ground heaved under each step, the tunnel stretching longer the faster I moved. I passed doors that weren't there a moment before, each one covered in handprints, each one humming softly like something inside was breathing. When I finally fell, I hit cold stone. The hum stopped. I opened my eyes and saw a narrow corridor lined with concrete. A light flickered overhead, a fluorescent bulb buzzing faintly. The air smelled sterile, electrical. A sign hung from the ceiling, U.S. Department of Interior, Research Division 4B. I blinked hard. My hands were still shaking. I knew this name. There had been rumors for years, facilities built beneath remote parks sealed off, supposedly for geological monitoring. Rangers whispered about them, but never saw proof. And yet here I was. The walls were clean, smooth, untouched by time. I followed the hallway until I reached a steel door marked Observation 7. My hand hovered over the latch, and for a second I thought I heard movement behind it, a faint, wet scraping, like fingernails on metal. I turned it. The room beyond was circular, lined with observation windows facing inward toward a single glass chamber. Inside that chamber stood another door, the same one, old wood, rusted hinges, that faint vibration running through it. The exact same door I'd seen in the forest in the tunnel in my dreams. Monitors around the room flickered with static, then brief flashes, people standing outside the door in different locations. Snow, desert, forest, always the same frame, always the same knocking, 3 times. The speakers above me clicked, a voice, mine again, but older, slower. "Containment failed, don't open the surface lock." The static roared, drowning it out. And then from the glass chamber came the knock. Once, twice, 3 times. The light inside the chamber dimmed. The wooden door began to tremble, dust spilling from the seams. Something pressed against it from the other side, shadows shifting in the cracks, a whisper leaking through the boards. "You left it open." I stumbled back, slamming into the wall. The hum came alive again, deep and rising. Every screen went black, and then one by one they flickered back on. Each showed my face, right there in that room, watching the door. Except in the screens, the door was already open. Behind me, I heard the hiss of air and the sound of wood splintering. I didn't turn, because some part of me already knew. Whatever stepped through that door had been waiting for me since the first time I heard the knocking. I just didn't know if it wanted me to see it or to become it. The last thing I felt was the warmth on the back of my neck, like a breath too close to be human, and the whisper that slid straight into my skull, "Close it, if you still can." Then, silence. No hum. No light. Just the faint echo of the door swinging shut. And somewhere far above, in the quiet forest, I imagine there's a ranger's truck still idling by the road. Engine cold, driver's seat empty, a trail of fresh footprints leading into the trees.